Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to open up the meeting with a moment of silent meditation or prayer and the pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, yeah, we can.
It's up to you, though.
Yeah, okay, yeah. We'll see how it goes. Okay, we have a little pre-meeting type today to start with the Bensalem Township Police Department Awards recognition presentation. Fred, do you want to, Fred here or did he leave?
Here.
Okay. Lieutenant, you want to, oh, there he is, okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
I just want to be sure.
Yeah.
Mr. President, council members, mayor, residents, and everyone who else has come out for tonight, we certainly appreciate you attending this awards ceremony. We have two groups of individuals and one individual that will be awarded tonight with some, as you'll hear, two of these incidents that happened in the last couple months are just absolutely amazing and truly are life-saving. Every day, the officers, the men and women of police, fire, and EMS, emergency responders in Bensalem, make a difference. In a lot of cases, are saving lives. But as these cases you'll hear tonight, we wanted to make sure that they were given the recognition that they so deserve because they truly saved lives. And I wanted to start with one particular incident involving three officers. Would Officer Matthew Malcolm, Norm Muller, and Kevin Howard please come forward? You'll hear the story of an incident these officers were involved in on December 22nd, 2018, just a little bit more than a month ago. On Saturday, December 22nd, 2018, at approximately 9:39 in the evening, Bensalem Township police officers Matthew Malcolm, Norm Muller, and Kevin Howard conducted a pedestrian stop on a male subject in the area of the 2000 block of Bristol Pike. The male at this time was being investigated for his involvement in a suspicious persons report on Herringbone Lane. These officers received a 911 call that this individual was acting suspicious, and that's all the information they had to go on at this time. During the course of the contact with the subject became agitated and refused to remove his hands from his coat pockets. The male subject began to yell at the officers and refused to remain calm and still. As all three officers approached him on foot, he continued to disregard the officers' commands to remove his hands from his coat pockets. Officer Howard was the first to make contact with the subject by wrapping his arms around the upper torso of him, fearing that he may be armed. As Officer Howard did this, the subject simultaneously pulled a handgun from his person with his left hand. Officer Malcolm yelled "gun" to alert the other officers, broke contact with the male, drawing his firearm in defense. Officer Muller immediately grabbed the male's left arm hand area and the handgun, which diverted the gun away from all three officers as the offender started to fire multiple rounds at the police officers. Officer Muller was able to divert the muzzle of the firearm towards an unoccupied building in the parking lot and eventually to the ground, where he was able to release the firearm from the offender's control. Because of the positioning of Officer Howard and Officer Malcolm, they could not use deadly force. Consequently, Officer Malcolm re-engaged the male and assisted Officer Mueller with disarming him. Officer Howard never released contact with the male's upper torso and neck area throughout the fight. The offender was taken to the ground and disarmed by all three officers. While on the ground, all three officers attempted to handcuff him, but he continued to resist arrest. Officer Malcolm then drive-stunned the male in the small of his back with his taser to gain compliance, and he was able to secure it without further incident. Due to the heroic actions of these officers, no one was injured during this critical incident, including the offender. Due to your display of courage, bravery, and an act above and beyond the call of duty when confronted by an armed and dangerous subject that exposed you to danger with the possibility of serious injury or death, you are hereby recognized for your outstanding service with the Bensalem Township Police Department Valor Award. As I hate statements to the bank. Just stop. Now do the civilians. Sorry. In Bensalem, not are we so lucky to have pretty amazing first responders, but our community always steps up to the plate. That's why Bensalem is known not just throughout Bucks County, but throughout the Commonwealth. In this next case, it wasn't necessarily police officers, but it was community members that came to the aid of a son of one of our first responders, the son of the director of EMS for Bensalem Township, the individual that is in charge of saving people's lives and putting paramedics on the street and making sure that all the police, fire, and EMS are properly trained with the latest techniques. And now this individual, because of the work that's being done in this community and the community members that we have, saved his son's life. Could the following people come forward? Nicholas Park, Miranda Smith, Matt Hurst, and Natalie Barber. On Thursday, July the 12th, 2018, at 7:44 in the morning, members of the Bensalem Aquatic Club were practicing at the Bensalem High School aquatic facility. During this training session, one of the team members became unresponsive while swimming underwater for a prolonged period of time. Daniel Park, a teammate, Daniel, Miranda Smith, a coach, observed that Daniel Topley was in trouble and proceeded to try to pull him from the water onto the pool deck. Matt Hurst, the coach, was able to remove this unresponsive swimmer from the pool and lay him on his back for further evaluation. It was determined that Daniel Topley was not breathing and he did not have a pulse. 911 was immediately notified. Coaches Miranda Smith and Matt Hurst proceeded to administer CPR. Natalie Barber, a respiratory therapist and a parent, ran from the stands and began to assist with the resuscitation of Daniel. Barber proceeded to provide chest compressions and emergency breathing in coordination with Coach Smith and Hurst. After several minutes, Daniel regained his pulse and was breathing on his own. The Bensalem Township Emergency Medical Services, Bensalem Fire Rescue, and police arrived on the scene shortly thereafter. Daniel was transported by paramedics to Jefferson Tarzan Emergency Room for further treatment. Through the heroic actions of many, Daniel Topley has made a full recovery and returned to swimming with the Aquatic Club. The Bensalem Township Department of Public Safety would like to formally recognize Daniel Park, Miranda Smith, Matt Hurst, and Natalie Barber for their heroic actions in saving the life of Daniel Topley. Can Daniel Topley come forward? So amazing work that's being done here. Our last award recipient tonight is Officer Foreign. Officer Foreign, could you come forward? Officer Connor Farnan has been a member of the Bensalem Township Police Department since December of 2015. He has been consistently one of the most professional, productive, and dependable officers in the department. In 2018, Officer Farnan made 249 criminal arrests, completed 832 incident reports, and issued over 167 traffic citations. During 2018, Officer Farnan made several noteworthy arrests and received 2 Outstanding Service Award commendations. Some of the incidences are outlined as follows. Officer Farnan has located stolen vehicles on patrol, which has led to the arrest and recovery of over 160 vials of crack cocaine, over 225 bags of heroin and marijuana, and U.S. currency. Officer Farnan has conducted vehicle stops and led to investigation of a local motel in which a driver was illegally possessing a firearm and was able to get a stolen gun off a street. Officer Farnan also on that stop recovered packets of heroin and numerous methamphetamine and U.S. currency. Additionally, Officer Farnan has conducted numerous narcotics investigations at local motels, which resulted in arrest and recovery of more methamphetamine, scales and other packaging material of narcotics. Officer Farnan is not only an aggressive patrol officer, but he is also a role model for other officers to emulate. Officer Farnan recently graduated our Field Training Officer School in 2018 and has begun training new officers. He routinely volunteers for the Police Activity League and other community events. Officer Farnan is a true asset to the Bensalem Township Police Department. For your dedication, loyalty, vigilance, teamwork, and excelling in overall job performance throughout the year, you are hereby recognized by the Bensalem Township Police Department as the 2018 Officer of the Year. I just wanted to thank Council, Mayor, for allowing us to come here and always supporting the police department. We certainly appreciate that. We've got an amazing group of officers, and thanks to the Mayor and to Council, your continued support allows us to train and equipped and protect the citizens of Bensalem Township, not only the police department, but fire department and EMS as well. Thank you very much for letting us come here this evening.
Thank you for coming, the people that are here to support the police and the civilian heroes. And we're going to take a 5-minute recess to give you a chance to exit if you need to. Okay, we're going to bring the meeting back to order. Congratulations to the police officers and the civilians that received rewards. The next on the agenda is public comment on agenda items. Each agenda item, we have an opportunity to speak, and there'll be public comments at the end. So seeing no one come forward, we'll close public comments on agenda items. First, number 4, approval of council minutes for the meetings. The first one is October 9th, 2018. Just from one we had skipped last year. Excuse me?
You said 9th, it's 29th.
No, it's October 9th, I'm sorry. She had, we corrected it. October 9th, 2018. Okay, so it's pretty extensive. I read through it, but is there any changes we need at this point? Because we had changed this a couple times. Is everybody okay with this?
I just have one correction, page 11. Under public comment, it's like the second to last sentence on the page. It says, the property is condemned in the sense that it is inhabitable. It should read uninhabitable.
Where's, okay. Property is condemned in the sense it is inhabitable. Yeah, it should be uninhabitable.
Uninhabitable.
Right.
That's
You got
all.
that, Deb?
Got it. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, any others? We're good? Okay, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from October 9, 2018 as corrected.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any against? Okay, that's good. Okay, next one is the meetings. We're getting into the new year, January 14, 2019. Okay, does anybody have any changes to the minutes? January 14, 2019? No changes. Does anybody want to make a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second? Mr. Techme, you got it? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay, that's good. Okay, the next one is January 28th, 2019. Okay, which are most recent. Okay, any changes to January 28th minutes as presented? Seeing nobody, hearing nobody come forward, is there anybody want to put a motion?
I'll make the motion, we accept the minutes.
Okay, Ed, and then Jesse is the
second.
second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay, so we're good with the minutes, okay. Okay, the next is our advice and consent of mayoral appointment of 4 members to our Disabled Advisory Board for 1 year. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. The 4 names put forward: James Wright, Michelle Baker, Matthew Neiman, and Teddy Walker.
Okay. Okay, are there any questions from any of the council members, or? I see that they do have their applications in.
I don't have a question about the recommendation to appoint these 4 individuals. We're relying on a section of code, it's from 1992, that says no less than 5 of the 7 members of this board shall be disabled residents. Is that really required that they be disabled to serve on the board? I would think that any interaction or experience with either family members or coworkers or any kind of friend or loved one would suffice to give some kind of experience. And I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement on that.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, then somewhat unrelated, I'd like to make a motion that we revise the township code to remove the requirement that no less than 5 of the members shall be disabled residents.
Well, I think we need more than a motion to do that, don't you?
Well, can we make a motion to have the solicitor draft a revision to the code to incorporate that change?
I think we should vote on this first, since it's the agenda item we're on. And then
I'm
go
perfectly okay with that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, can you consider that, we'll consider doing that. He's saying that he doesn't think they should necessarily have to be all five out of what, is it, 7?
Yeah, it says 5 out of 7.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
we've never been able to do that.
yeah, so maybe we'll look at changing that.
Let's clean
then.
up the code, and I want to,
I have no
Okay.
problem with that.
No problem with
If there's
that.
no other questions, I'll make a motion, we appoint the members.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay,
Now, Joe, you would, that would be something you guys would handle, correct?
Yes, we'll, Ms. Gallagher will take care of preparing an ordinance that will revise the membership requirements for the Disabled Persons Advisory Board. In most cases, for these kinds of boards, this is not a state mandated board, this is a township board. In most cases, these kinds of boards, the township has tried consistently to have at least 1 or 2 individuals
Yeah,
on the
with
board
preference,
who
yeah.
fall within the
Absolutely,
category.
and-
So if council's collectively of a mind, we'll change the 5 perhaps to 2.
yeah, there's physical disabilities and other kind of disabilities that I think.
Sure,
that
but,
there's a
and
large
and
spectrum
again,
of people.
there are folks who may not be disabled themselves, but have family members
Yes.
or have dealt with it in the past or
okay.
work in that field,
As you'll
so.
see on these.
That'll make it
Understood.
easier, yeah, that's good.
and, to kind of piggyback off that one, we've also previously addressed the Drug and Alcohol Advisory Board. I'd like that section of the code revised as well to reflect that we're not going to require an 8th grade student to serve on that board. It can be any,
Just a
any
student.
Yes,
Student, yeah, because we've been doing the high school.
exactly.
Right,
And I'd like the code to just be updated to reflect that.
Yeah, we're doing, it
You
originally
haven't
said 8th grade.
formally
We're
adopted.
we've been doing a high school student because it was too difficult with the parents and such.
We'll put
Okay,
both-
let's
we'll put both
concentrate on
items into
this.
one ordinance.
Is, Judge,
I'm sorry, excuse me. Mr. Pizzo, there was a motion that was put on the table. I mean, is that something we have to formalize?
No, we'll bring a proposed ordinance to you as we typically do, and then you can vote on it,
Okay,
so.
thank you very much.
yeah, we don't need to handle the motions or so. Okay, Mr. Judge.
Well, still
Okay, we
gonna
have
do this tonight.
the honor of having Judge Mike Gallagher here. Mike, you want to come up? I know some of the people are here that are volunteering to serve on the Bensalem Disabilities Board. So any of the people that may be here, I saw Ted here, right? Okay. So it's James Wright, Michelle Baker, Matt Neiman, and Ted Walker. I know one of them couldn't come because of the weather situation.
One
Okay, we
one
have.
lady called up, she was.
Yeah, she was sick, or the weather, Michelle. Thanks, guys. Congratulations. Teddy, take care. Okay. Number 6 is a reapproval and signing of the record plan for Ivy State Road Property LLC. Ron, do you have this?
This is a plan that was approved by council on September 27th, 2018. There were numerous minor changes, and we've listed them all. There's 10 of them there. We recommend that council reapprove the plans prior to signing because the 90-day recording period has elapsed.
Okay. And we'll stay and sign these afterwards
Yes, I have them right
Okay,
here.
all right, so make sure you
Sign
get
right
3
here in
people,
the chambers.
to sign them.
I'll make the motion, we approve as presented.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? We have a motion, does anybody have a second to approve? I'll second the motion.
I've got some questions.
Oh, you have questions first?
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
go ahead.
Kind of why I was hesitant. A couple of these comments appear to be fairly significant. Revised driveway entrance layout on State Road, revisions to State Road in response to PennDOT and TPD comments. Can we get a little bit more clarification on what those revisions are?
If I recall, they're mostly providing turning lanes for entrance into the site and location of the driveway along the frontage.
Okay, so it's a different plan than we've seen before?
Well, it's a matter of feet.
Oh, okay,
It's
just,
not a major change.
okay.
Did PennDOT make those suggestions?
Yes,
Is that-
PennDOT has
Every time
required-
they make
They
suggestions, they have to
require
agree
the
with
change.
PennDOT says.
Yes.
And
That's
that's
fine,
when
I
we
was-
approved those with an original, and then PennDOT made the changes.
Right.
So it's still basically what we approved with a little
Right.
bit of movement.
The turning lane wasn't in there before, though.
The turning lane, yeah, I think that's one of the things we approved.
I think
Yeah,
that
we
Was the
approved
turning
that.
lane in there
there was a
originally?
left-hand lane into the site.
Oh, the left-hand
Left-hand
lane, okay,
lane,
all right,
yeah.
yeah.
Into the
yeah.
site.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so Mr. Polari made a motion, I second, Joe, am I allowed to second a motion? Yes, I can. Okay, I seconded the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Okay. All right, thank you. So make sure to grab 3 of us at least to get that signed. Okay. Consideration of resolution for these are standard 537 Pennsylvania Sewage Facilities Act for the Bensalem Veterans Housing. Mr. Gantz, are you handling this too?
Mr. Pizer does a great job of this.
Mr. Pizzo, do you want to explain the Sewage Facilities Act?
I'm sure that Mr. Gans would do an equally fine job. The,
It's riveting, information.
There's really not much to add. As council is aware, this is the DEP-required resolution for the amendment of the Township Act 537 plan. This is for the Bensalem Senior Veterans Housing Project on Mechanicsville Road. The land development was previously approved by council, and this resolution is required by DEP as part of the approval process for the sewer facilities. The resolution is in a form acceptable for your consideration and approval this evening.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll put that in the form of a motion.
Is there a
Second.
second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any against? Okay, that's good. Thank you. Okay, number 8, consideration of public hearing in the ordinance amending Chapter 225 vehicles to enact a no parking sign along the entire length of Imperial Court, northbound and southbound. Okay, does anybody have this, or?
The
you have this, Mr.
administration
Pizzo?
received a complaint regarding trucks and trailers parking too close to driveways and obstructing the view of motorists along Imperial Court. The mayor thereafter directed the traffic safety officer to conduct an investigation of the situation down there. The traffic safety officer's conclusion and recommendation, along with some photographs, are attached and are in council's packet. The recommendation is to include no parking signs along both sides of Imperial Court, a form of ordinance authorizing that recommendation for no parking along both the entire length of both the northbound and southbound sides of Imperial Court, has been duly advertised and is in a form acceptable for your consideration and approval this evening.
Where is this, Joe?
Yeah, which industrial park is
Off of
it?
State
South-
Road.
Off of State Road?
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know it was behind the post office or off of State Road. I
Yeah,
knew it was an
all right.
industrial park. Across the waterside back there. Okay, and this was recommended by our traffic safety supervisor and the traffic safety officer. Okay, there's any questions from the board?
Yeah, do we know why the trucks and trailers are parking there in the first place? What's there that they're,
It's all business.
It's all business, yeah, it's all
business.
industrial, they
They can't get in and out, they just park it to not be lazy.
just,
okay, all
just
right,
more convenient for them, but it ties up traffic.
understood.
You can't see.
There's no residential parking on that street, is there?
No, it's all
Okay.
industrial.
And then how are we going to enforce it? Obviously, we'll put up signs, but, will it be
They get tickets,
regularly
yeah.
enforced?
Yeah, just like any other traffic sign.
All right, just making sure.
Yep, it's public road.
They
so-
have ample parking on the business sites, correct?
Yeah, I think they're just making it more convenient for themselves to park next to it and walk right in and leave the cars out there and trucks.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll make
anybody
a
else?
motion, we approve.
Okay, we have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Okay?
You should afford the public an opportunity on the ordinance.
Oh, you should, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, it's an ordinance. Is there anybody that's for or against this no parking signs along Imperial Court that would like to come and speak on it? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close public comment. Is it okay that we did the vote?
That's fine.
Yeah, okay.
The record will reflect that the public was afforded an opportunity
Okay.
to comment.
All right, thank you. Okay, number 9 on the agenda, consideration of public hearing on another ordinance amending the code of township for the addition of a new residential district to be titled MUR, the Mixed Use Residential District, set forth in the regulations governing development. Okay, is there, hello, how are you? Are you here for, okay. Tom, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And the applicant, Len Ponzia, a Bensalem resident, is here with me.
And just to clarify, this is in reference to Mother Catherine Drexel's property.
Yes.
So the public knows, yeah?
Yes,
Okay.
actually, before...
The Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, actually. It's not,
Before you, let me get some housekeeping out of the way.
And while Mr. Hecker's doing his housekeeping, the record should reflect that the property, that the hearing on this proposed ordinance and the rezoning have been previously advertised. As council will recall, the subject property had not been posted in advance of council's last meeting on January 28, I believe. And so this matter was tabled to a date certain of this evening to afford the administration an opportunity to post the property. The property was posted the very next day and was properly posted in accordance with the requirements of the township zoning ordinance and the municipality's planning code. So the council can proceed this evening with consideration of the potential rezoning of the property. I should also note, Mr. Knowles, that there is some interrelation between items 9 and 10 on the agenda. Item 9 is the consideration of a text amendment to the township zoning ordinance to create a new residential district, the mixed-use residential district. The impetus for that new zoning district would be item 10, which would then be the rezoning of the what's known as the St. Catherine Drexel property from its current zoning of institutional to the MUR mixed use. So since there will be, I would imagine, a significant amount of overlap in the discussions on items 9 and 10, council may want to consider treating both agenda items 9 and 10 as part of the same hearing that you're about to be.
yeah, I was going to ask, so we're going to treat this as this 9 and 10 together, but we'd have to just vote separate at that point.
That's correct,
Yeah,
sir.
Okay. I understand it has to do with both, so, and public comment will be to that effect too. Okay, Tom, you want to?
Yes, thank you. The matter that's before council this evening, as noted, involves the Mother Catherine Drexel property. Some time back, everyone is aware, the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, after a lot of deliberation and prayer, made the very difficult decision to place this property up for sale. In doing so, they hired a national firm to assist them and set about to find not only the appropriate person to buy it, but somebody who they believed, I don't want to speak for them, but they believe would respect the uniqueness of the property, the history, and the integrity of it. My client, Len Ponzia, is a longtime Bensalem resident who also happens to have some personal ties to this property. I'm going to let him tell you about that himself first. But after the selection process that involved various users from all over with different concepts for redevelopment, Len and his company Aquinas was chosen. And I believe he offered something unique to this process, and that is the fact that he did have a history with this property, many, many years as a resident of Bensalem Township, and had a vision as to how this property could be developed while at the same time preserving the integrity and historic nature of a lot of it. So we then set about trying to implement the best way to proceed with the development, looking through the ordinances, and we determined, knowing the development task ahead, that Len's idea for a mixed-use residential community could only happen for this property by presenting to the township an ordinance that would combine a lot of uses together, perhaps the accessory uses as well, that would aid in the preservation of a lot of the structures on the property, which combination of uses, I believe, is not present in any one district in the township. So we submitted a combination petition to the township, two-part petition. One is your consideration of this new zoning district, which is the MUR district, mixed-use residential. And the second, if appropriate, in the minds of council, would be to rezone the subject property to the new mixed-use residential category. So there are the two items, and I agree with Mr. Pizzo, they overlap, that are before you this evening for your consideration. To assist you with this, what we'd like to do is to show you initially a concept plan, because I think it helps you understand provisions in the ordinance, having an idea as to what the developer is proposing to do. The concept plan has been modified since we first started this process, and modifications of that plan, as Len will tell you, came about largely because we did something we probably should have done early in the game, and that was to have a meeting with the neighbors right here in this meeting room. A lot of comments and suggestions came out of that meeting, and we've effectively incorporated those into the plan. And Len will talk to you about those items tonight. And we'll also have a presentation by the project architect, Peter Stanfill. Peter's going to show you the vision of how we think this property can be developed consistent with preservation and the what they call adaptive reuse of the existing buildings, which we'll detail for you a little bit later on. So without getting too deeply involved at the moment, I'd rather do that through the people who are prepared to talk and do a better job at it than I would do. First, I'd like to introduce you to Dave Fleming from Marathon. Where's Dave at? There he is. Dave is our engineering consultant and has been working hand in hand with the architect and with Len in developing a plan. I'm going to give you the overview of the plan before we get into some detail. Dave, if you will.
Yeah, how you doing? Dave Fleming, Marathon Engineers. I just want to briefly...
Yeah, before you start, you need to get sworn in as an expert witness if you're going to. Can you identify yourself to the...
David Fleming, Marathon Engineers.
Just swear them all.
Raise your hand, please.
Okay.
You swear the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, and do so forever.
I do.
Well, it was on the architecture. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so as the plan that has been prepared that coincides with the proposed ordinance is behind you, and I just want to again point out how this plan developed, and it's been developing. I've been involved for over a year as we've evaluated the property and tried to work with the existing buildings that are going to be retained and develop a coherent, organized, land plan. So as the council's aware, ultimately it's a mixed-use residential property with age-targeted townhouses. It will also have the assisted living component, which is adjoining many of the existing structures to be maintained, the assisted living facility, apartments, as well as independent apartments. So as you look at the plan from an engineering standpoint, we look at circulation, drainage, and working with the land as for grading and such to provide some coherency. This plan in front of you has an interior loop street Non-loaded, meaning it functions as a loop street with two access points to Bristol Pike being the north side of the property, and 95 adjoining the back, all access, of course, off of Bristol Pike. The land plan, from an access standpoint, access and circulation, then has further looping through the lower part of the site, which allows access to each of the individual uses, the assisted living, the independent living.
Can you orient us as to where Route 13 is?
Okay, Route
Langsam
13,
and-
Route 13, yeah, that plan really should label that, but Route 13 is to the top, that would be the north. And Route 95 is to the south. That's, you see the band of trees that adjoining the highway, but if you look at that plan closely with the backdrop, you'll see 95 there. So going to the access, the main access points at the existing light to the west, and with an interior loop that then would swing around, provide again a non-loaded interior loop that then is a spine to the other portions of the project. The other portion of the circulation I wanted to point out, now currently the neighborhood to the west has an interconnect to some of the parking areas at the St. Catherine Drexel facility now, and some of those folks, then I believe it's almost all the way to the westerly stub, if you will, where the folks come out there. We've laid out the road and we've identified 2 or 3 appropriate locations that neighborhood can access our interior loop road on that western border, so that that neighborhood could come out to the traffic signal that will be, on the westerly access point. That obviously is a great benefit, as I don't have to tell anybody in this township how Bristol Pike backs up. So that was something that we had considered, and when we had the neighborhood meeting, that was discussed at length, and like I said, there's plenty of opportunity to do that. If you look at that road alignment, we parallel that western property line, and very easily those interconnects are made. And we have shown on the concept, keep in mind it's a concept, not a detailed plan, although it is certainly to scale, and it has been evaluated as though it was a final plan. Some of those portions of this project could be evaluated. So again, if coming north to south, Bristol Pike being north, the interior loop, the age-restricted townhouses feeding off of the road, and then again to the dark red buildings those are many of the existing buildings that are going to be maintained and to some extent reutilized. The building in the interior, I'm going to call it almost like the center of gravity of the site. That would be the assisted living component, and those apartments separated with a common loop circulation drive for drop off with the independent living, which again is to the east. The light blue buildings you see are three-story, what they call active adult apartments, and those are again on the perimeter of the parking fields. Those buildings would have parking underneath of it, and plus the parking fields to try to provide the appropriate level of parking throughout the facility. You can look at the site plan that you see in front of you. The other components of it are the clubhouse and the townhouse area, and from an infrastructure standpoint, the important drainage are spread throughout, and we've done some preliminary calculations to ensure that we provide adequate areas so that we can do the proper thing with the stormwater drainage. So from an overview standpoint, that is the plan. I think there's a 605 between 605 units on that plan from the different portions of it, and And again, it's an orderly progression from north to south.
Thank you, Dave. I'd like to introduce Len Ponzia, who is the developer and principal of Aquinas. He's going to tell you a little bit more about the plan, what revisions have happened already before we even got to this point. Len, if you will.
Good evening, all. Thank you very much for the opportunity to meet with you this evening. Thank you all for joining us. As Tom pointed out, my name is Len Ponzia. Many of you know me. I've been a resident here of Bensalem some 48 years and live in Andalusia, as also many of you know. We met, as Tom Hecker pointed out, here in the assembly room with some of the neighbors and some of the community group members to discuss some of their questions, some of their concerns, and some of their ideas. What I will share with you this evening, I'm going to walk you through what we believe to be some of those major topics that were surfaced and discussed, and then present to you a plan that we believe addressed those topics. Okay? One of the first concerns that was surfaced was the density of the townhomes, the number of townhome units. We've been using north as being the top of the screen, Bristol Pike, so we'll continue to call it north, and south being I-95, where you see the row of trees or greenery on the concept plan. So in any event, the density of the townhomes, we had originally proposed 104 units. And we understood that the community and many were concerned that there were too many units. Also, there were questions as to how the overall property would look once it was repurposed, as we were the stewards in the redevelopment of the site along Bristol Pike, and what that visual would be to the traveling public and to all of us who all feel very special, very spiritual, and very dedicated to that property and its history. So that was also a major issue. In addition to that, questions surfaced regarding view corridors. Once again, if we call the top of the screen the north, the question was in retaining the buildings that are shown in red, the existing mission center, the mother house, the chapel, the crypt, the convent, the novice area, with the way the current plan, the original submitted plan, was shown. To see that from Bristol Pike, the views were obstructed because of the number of townhomes that you see there to the north of the screen. So that was also a concern. In addition to that, the neighbors, just to, as once again we'll use the term west for this evening, to the left of the screen as I face it, had used for many years access to the intersection of Humeville and Bristol Pike safely through the property. So the questions and the concerns were how could they continue to safely traverse Bristol Pike and access to Humeville into the future. And then lastly, the questions regarding some of the accessory uses that were described in the proposed ordinance that spoke to physical therapy and medical offices and dining and pharmacy and salon and those uses and what that meant for our project and the overall development program. That last topic I'm going to have Mr. Stample speak to. Excuse me. So the plan that we are presenting now on the screen, which we did share with many the night we had a community meeting here, show our effort to try to address some of those questions or ideas or concerns. So walking through each of them, first, the density of the townhomes. What we have proposed is a reduction of the number of townhomes from 104 units to 90, thereby obviously addressing that issue as to too many townhomes for the overall development. In addition to that, we showed what we see and will incorporate as the vision of the property along its frontage of Bristol Pike. And some of those visuals are to the bottom of the screen where you see the stone piers and the black aluminum railing, et cetera, to the project and the entrance features for the site. And then also, in addition, we incorporated a much larger acreage, as you see in green, to the top of the screen, or we're calling north as it abuts Bristol Pike. So now that large area, in conjunction with the cemetery property, provides a large open expanse view corridor to the property and to the mother house and Mission Center and existing buildings there that we all respect there on the property. So those were the some of the questions and some of the answers that we collectively discussed with the group, and hope that that addressed some of their concerns. Dave touched on, and I mentioned, access from the neighbors just to the west, as we're calling it this evening, to the intersection. And what we provided were 3 A, B, and C locations, each of which can work from an engineering perspective for access, egress, circulation, and safe traversing through the site and to the intersection. And ultimately, we would work with the community group to determine which would best address their needs and their wants and desires. So our hope was that what you see this evening was our sincere effort to try to listen both to the concerns and questions, but also to the ideas and how we could together, working together, make this project the vision and reality that we would all believe in and endorse and support. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Peter Stanfield, the project architect, which will walk through some of the architectural plans and visuals, okay? Thank you. Peter?
I know. Yeah, I know. I could have done. Peter, you need to get sworn into as an expert. I didn't see you back
Yes.
there. Sorry about that.
Raise your right hand, please. You swear to testify that you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, and do so affirm.
I do.
Okay, will you just say your name and your title, or, so we...
My name is Peter Stanfield. I'm a principal with Stanfield Associates. We are architects and planners.
Okay.
As Len had mentioned, and David previously, there are some buildings that you see in the center of the screen. There are the buildings that are dark red. They are the existing structures. If you're looking at the board to the right, immediately to the right of that building, is it looks like 2 donuts that are joined. That is the assisted living memory care building, and then to the right of that is the independent living. We then have a series of other buildings that are the active adult leased units. If you were facing south, if you were on Route 13 facing south looking towards Route 95, this is our vision, our concept that we would like to present. And the building that you see in the forefront to the left on the screen, this is the memory care assisted living building that we're proposing. You can see there's a mix of materials that respects the historic structures. There's stone. We have used hipped roofs to bring the scale and mass of the building down. There are different roof lines to break up some of the massing along the walls, various window types and sizes. To the right is the visitor center that's existing, and then behind that you can see the mother house, the chapel, and the other existing buildings that we were proposing to repurpose. This is a view of what would be the main entry for the assisted living memory care. This would be facing east. You would be looking west from the access drive in the center, looking at the main entry to the building. Again, the same mix of materials, hipped roofs. The floor plan here shows how we're proposing the mix of residential units as well as the common area dining. There are a number of different spaces that were listed in the draft ordinance. Some of those, the hair salon, you can see on the right-hand upper portion in the lighter blue, it's labeled salon. There is a library behind that, a arts and crafts area. There are TV rooms, There are kitchen spaces adjacent to the dining facilities. There are also, in the darker, almost a purplish blue, you'll see PT. That is a physical therapy area. And there's also offices, and there's a doctor's office. So the medical office component of the ordinance, this is what we were presenting and talking about when we had that in the ordinance there, that there are going to be small spaces. You can see from, although it is tough to read, I'll give you an example of some of the square footage. The library is 300 square feet. The arts room, arts and crafts, is 425. The dining facilities are approximately 1,600 square feet. Some of the other areas, there are some lounges that are approximately 360 square feet. Nurse's office, 324. So you can see these are not large spaces. These are spaces that are accessory or ancillary uses for the care of the patients in the memory care and the assisted living. The residential units themselves, they are approximately 330 square feet, 340 square feet. The next building I would like to present, this is if you were facing east, right across the main drive from the assisted living memory care residence. You can see, again, to the left on the lower board, the long elevation, the porte cochere at the entry, hipped roofs, again, breaking material. There's stone, there's some stucco, there's different glazing. We have some higher elements to help break up the roof line so that you don't have a very strong horizontal line across the building. The image to the on the top there is if you were facing north, looking towards Route 13, this is basically how that elevation of the building would look. In floor plan, the same color codes you can see. There are in light blue and darker blue certain areas that are amenity spaces. To the right-hand side, you can see there are restaurants called out. There's a production kitchen which serves the restaurant areas as well as the pub. There's a area that's in the darker blue that is yoga, fitness, pool. There are other amenities similar to what was in the assisted living memory care facility. There is some office space, there's management, there's back of house, janitor's closet, lounges for employees, and things of that nature as well. The mix of residential units, there is a variety of square footages, depending on if it's a one-bedroom or a two-bedroom. They range from 677, 783, 849, and then the two bedrooms are 1,050, 1,238. There are, same as the previous assisted living, independent living, there are some additional public spaces that there's a courtyard, as you can see, in between the pub area and the pool and fitness, where it provides some outdoor space. There'll be some hardscape as well as landscape in that area to soften it. And you can see that the circulation is a simple loop pattern, and it opens up onto a courtyard in the center as well. These are the other two elevations for the building. Same use of material, same attention to detail. So all four elevations for both of these proposed buildings will have a similar palette and color materials. We're not changing things from elevation to elevation. It will be a common theme throughout all of the buildings. The active adult leased units, there are 3 buildings. They vary in size slightly. One is, Building 1 is 88 units, Building 2 is 84, Building 3 is 88. And the unit size is, again, if it's a one-bedroom, 871 square feet. There are two bedrooms, which are 1,277 and 1,276. And there is slight variation just because of either mechanical chases or electrical closet next to it, if it's an end unit or an interior. There is parking that surrounds, I think, on the site plan. It was shown that there was parking adjacent to the building, so residents can park close and walk right in to the buildings. We have some images of completed projects that we've done. What we're proposing is going to be a similar look and feel. This one happens to be in Richboro, Twining Village. You can see at the entry, the image on the right is the lobby and cafe area. There's a coffee bar. The library is not in the view, but basically the shot was taken standing in the library. And then you can see to the left, you have the lounge, and behind it is the library. So this is the level of finish and detail that we're envisioning for this community. To the right is a image of a private dining. A lot of times family at holidays will come and visit loved ones, and they would like to have a private dinner with the entire family. So this affords them the ability to have an area that is kind of off of the main dining. It's still adjacent to the kitchen, so it's easily serviced, but it gives them space where they can enjoy some private time with loved ones. The restaurant to the left, again, attention to detail, hardwood flooring, a lot of natural light, fireplace, plenty of lighting so that there aren't dark spaces. Hair salon to the left, depending on the size of the facility, the number of chairs and other, for nails, pedicure, manicure, as well as for haircuts, dyeing, and things like that. This may vary in size, but this is probably fairly close to what we envisioned for this community as well. The pub area to the right, you can see it's not Chicken and Pete's. It's something that it does have a TV. There's area to sit. A lot of times residents will gather there, meet other friends or couples that are coming down for dinner. They can have a drink and then go in and enjoy their meal. This is a photograph of the townhouses. And the townhouses are 1,900 square feet, 2,000 square feet. They are master down. There are options for certain spaces within. There are decks to the rear of the townhouses, so there is some passive recreation area for the residents.
Peter, if I can interrupt, this is one of our projects.
Len, can you come to the, you need to come to
I
the
can
podium.
interrupt. This is a project that's a similar layout and interior finishes and construction, except at St. Catherine's, it will not be a brick frontage. It'll be consistent with the balance of the project of stone finishes to the veneers of the buildings.
And it will be all garages. That's just an office or something?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
correct.
Yes, the one on the right is a preview center, and once it's sold, the garage door will be put back in. This is just another view. You can see there's a front porch, a railing, landscaping, a nice walkway leading up to the front door. And here are the floor plans. As I mentioned, they are master down so that, again, for age-qualified folks can age in place, and if they ever do need to have more care, they can certainly move into either independent living or the assisted living facilities that are on the community's campus. This is a shot from the inside. It's the dining looking into the great room. So you can see it's very open field, plenty of light. Nice shot of the kitchen, the dining. Here's a close-up of the great room, living room, fireplace.
So that's an overview of what the project we envision will look like. A lot of engineering has already occurred to get us to this point tonight. So oftentimes when we're dealing with zoning, rezoning matters, it's difficult to pinpoint the plan. But I will tell you that we're very confident that if this project is approved, moves forward, what you've seen on these plans here this evening will be very, very similar, substantially similar, if not identical, to what's being shown. We basically did the plan layout after a lot of consultation with different professionals and drew the ordinance around the plan. That's why I'm confident in telling you that's what's going to ultimately be developed, presumably at the next phase. When I say that the ordinance was drafted around that, that's really what's in front of council this evening. We have tried to incorporate into this ordinance all aspects that you've seen on this plan, basically the different types of mixed-use residential, as well as accessory uses, which are typically found in these types of communities, so that it's effectively an all-encompassing use covering a broad spectrum of residential uses, limited to either feeding into the senior facilities or providing for senior care, senior campus. Council have any questions about anything that's been presented? We're more than happy to answer them.
I do. I have a question on the apartments end. When they were presenting, he said there's going to be 2-bedroom apartments.
Yes,
These are 55 and older with no children, correct?
that is correct.
Because we have a lot of facilities in the township where we've approved senior with no children, and the grandparents end up with their grandchildren, and the whole idea behind this is not to put a burden on the school district. So how are we going to be assured that that's not going to happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Different municipalities will address that issue in different ways. One of the things that will happen as this project moves forward is that we will be preparing a declaration of restrictions and covenants, which will be recorded against the property, which will cover the age restriction. In order to restrict property by age, you're effectively discriminating by age. But Federal Fair Housing Act says you can do that, provided this is tailored toward people 55 and older. We can provide in the declaration, or even in the ordinance if you want it, a limitation on the amount of time that people under a certain age can reside in the community. There are two sides of that story, because I hear what you're saying. Sometimes grandparents find themselves all of a sudden acting as parents again to their grandchildren. If you don't want that, that can be handled by limiting the amount of time that underage, when I say underage, children 18 or 19 years of age or younger can live in a facility. And we can do that either in the ordinance or by the declaration that I mentioned to you.
And just to clarify, Tom, yeah, most 55 and older communities have a restriction on how,
That is
the
correct.
time that people can, younger people can live, maybe a week or two or something. But it'll be in the deed carried with the property that the 55 and older have to remain 55 and older.
Yes, it's actually, it's a separate document. It's called a Declaration of Restrictions and Covenants. That is effectively becomes part of the deed because it's incorporated into the deed itself.
Okay, so I just wanna
And
make
we
sure.
are obligated, I might point out.
We're not depending on an association, we're depending on a deed. The title itself has to stay 55.
Right. We are
So a newer
obligated to
owner,
provide that and disclose that right up front as part of the sales process
Okay.
or rental process.
So the process would be someone buys a house, they have their grandchildren in their house because they had a tragedy or a problem or something like that, they get thrown out of the house now? What happens?
If it's the township's desire to limit the amount of time that an underage child can reside in this community, the answer is yes.
Well, that's not, just to clarify, that's for the 55 and older leased units. That's not for the townhouse.
That's, yes, that's the active
I'm talking
adult.
about the apartments.
You're talking
I'm
about
fine with your price, I'm saying.
Yeah, you can't live with any 55s like that. Yeah, you can't have children living there. Every 55 community, like Chancellor Glenn is like that. So it's.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And so the answer is, again, I'm sorry, since Joe was trying to,
No, you said purchase. They wouldn't be purchased. They would be leasing.
they're leasing a townhouse?
They were leasing it.
No,
We're
no,
not
no.
talking about the townhouse.
I'm talking about the apartments.
Apartments.
Talking about the 55 and older.
Apartments, okay.
The townhouses aren't 55 and older.
They're-
That's all I was clarifying, that's all.
They're active adult lease units, the apartments. That's what we're talking about for the age restriction.
And the people that go there would move into the other unit if they needed the memory care or that type of, they could go
that's
from one to the other. That would be the
absolutely
purpose of
correct.
it.
Absolutely correct. It's supposed to complement each other.
There's a ordinance we have, which is the CCRC, you're familiar with that, Continuing Care Retirement Community. I know you're familiar with that.
Yes.
And it seems like the parking on the overall presentation you're making for the MUR ordinance seems to be a lot less than it is for the other CCRC community. I give you examples if you want, but it always seems to be, for example, a townhouse in our ordinance would normally be a 3.5 parking. I think you're down to about 2 per unit.
No, we commit to 2.5 units, I'm sorry, 2.5 parking spaces per townhouse unit, not counting the garage. In
Well,
typical.
we're not going to count the garage, you know that.
So.
We don't count the garage, and you know that, but go ahead.
So.
But other townhouses are 3.5, is what I'm
So
saying.
effectively, these would be 3.5.
What would?
Because what we do, your ordinance would require the 2.5 for the townhouses,
I
okay?
think it's 3.5, but go ahead.
So what we do with the townhouses, we restrict the townhouses from the garages being able to be converted into habitable space. So they're restricted for the storage of vehicles and limited accessory storage. So effectively works out to be 3.5
Well, it
for
doesn't.
the, for
It
the
really
town,
doesn't.
for the
Go ahead.
townhouses.
It doesn't. Well, go ahead. You're saying it does, but it doesn't. You can't use a garage, as you know, for a parking part of the construction. It can't be used. It can't be utilized as that. And you know that, and I know.
No, I'm not arguing with,
Okay.
what I'm saying to you is that, you know, we've committed to 2.5 spaces without counting, 2.5 without counting the garage space.
And
But
you're doing it again.
Okay.
I don't know if you don't hear me or I don't hear you, but we're not communicating here. You're giving us 2.5 parking spaces, correct, Tom?
For the townhouse
Townhouses.
units, correct.
No, actually,
2.5.
I'm going to step in and correct. The code presented here says 2 spaces per dwelling.
I know, and we discussed that. He's saying that they're willing to increase it to 2.5.
And
Ed,
what's,
you're talking
what?
about
But he's talking about the
He's
townhouses
talking
in
about
general. He's talking about-
R3 townhouse zoning in the township, correct?
Correct, 3.5, that's
Right.
correct. Go ahead, that's what I have. Go ahead.
Okay, so,
Well, I'm saying, are you going to address that? Let me ask you that. You can't use the garages. You know that. Can you
as a
address that
practical
in
matter,
another way?
they will, okay? They will, because we're going to restrict their garages, so they have to be used for
Doesn't
parking.
matter if you
But I'm not-
restrict it.
but
They
I'm
can
not-
make it into a hobby shop if
But
they
I'm
want.
not counting it. I'm saying we're providing 2.5 spaces, not counting the single-car garage space. So with 2.5 spaces without that.
Okay, can you provide 3.5 spaces for the townhouses?
Can we do it?
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you that we can't. There's a lot of space on that plan that we're trying to maintain as green area. I mean, if you're looking at overall parking, I don't know, I can't tell you that we can't do it. I can't tell you we can unless that has been looked at. Len, has that been?
No, but I would suggest that we, number one, have Mark Roth speak to all the projects and all the sites of all the places that they've shown that, on average, 2 parking spaces per unit, including garage, is all that is needed and required. Bear with me. So what we were proposing tonight is different than what was originally submitted. And what we were proposing was 3.5 spaces per townhome unit. However, 2.5 spaces are outside of the property. The space in the garage, there will be a restriction, not unlike the restriction we described earlier for other components of the project, that say you cannot have anything but a car parked in that garage, nothing else. You can't convert it to a hobby shop. You can't convert it to another recreation room. It has to park a car. So putting on, respectfully, my traffic engineer's hat when I was an engineer many years ago, I would offer that Mark can speak in detail that all the studies show that you only need 2, and what we're proposing tonight are 3.5.
You're telling me that if I buy a house there and I want to put up shelving for
Shelving
storage,
still does not prevent your car from parking.
if I put up shelving and use it as storage to such a point where it interferes with the length of my car and I have to put my car in the driveway, that is no longer a viable space. And I may want to do that if that's my house.
But you will know when you buy that property that you are restricted
From putting up shelving and
in your garage that would not allow a typical vehicle to park. Mark is here, but I know you want more than the 2 per unit, so we were hoping that coming here tonight, what we're proposing would bridge the gap.
All right, and then on the other aspect here, let me take this a little further. We'll come back to this also. You also have the parking, which, again, comparing the CCRC zoning, basically, or generally speaking, gives you a half of a car per bed, where you're proposing a quarter of a car, 25% per bed. So that's half the amount of parking for that also. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand exactly what
Okay.
you're saying.
All right, so you're proposing 25% per bed in the assisted care, and excuse me for the correct terminology if I'm not using it correctly, but the extended care and that things, where the other zoning that we presently have is 50% or 1/2 vehicle per bed.
Yes.
So you're half that amount also.
So one of the things that's happened in putting this project together, you see on the bottom of the plan, Hearst Construction, Hearst Senior Care Facilities. Hearst is the longest provider of senior living facilities throughout this country, and multi-generational. They are a partner in this and provided a lot of depth and insight into this plan. The 0.25% per bed is what they have experienced as really all that is needed. Unfortunately, there are people in that portion of the community who don't get a lot of visitors. They're in bed for the most part, or the memory care unit, don't have the ability to drive. They don't need vehicles. So the 0.25 is in the ordinance as a result of Hearst's experience in giving us some guidance and direction based on their operation of many senior care facilities for a long time throughout the country.
Okay?
Good.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
finished.
was there a traffic engineer plan done?
I'm sorry, what?
Was there a traffic engineer plan
Yeah.
done yet? That's been completed?
Mark?
Do we have any idea of what the impact would be on Bristol Pike?
Mark, come on up.
We have another expert, so we need to swear in again.
Good evening.
You need to swear in, too, I'm sorry. He wasn't here a minute ago. He's been here.
I do.
And before he even says anything, I always say this, and I'm happy to say that. We look for Mark's guidance in projects, especially in Bensalem, because he's a Bensalem resident, and brings that to the table as well. So, if you will.
Thank you.
Mark, you've been sworn in before, so I appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
Absolutely, no problem at all. Mark Roth, ROTH, McMahon Associates. Yes, there has been a traffic impact study performed for the site. What it does is looks at the existing road network. In this case, the intersections along Bristol Pike, and then looks at the proposed uses. In this case, as I think was discussed tonight, the proposed uses are senior housing, age-targeted townhomes, assisted living, independent living. All in traffic engineering terms are lower generators than some generators that could occur at this particular property, namely single-family homes or child care facilities or so forth. So we looked at the trip generation for the site, added that traffic to the existing network, and determined that there is capacity at the signalized intersection to accommodate the proposed development as presented. There are plans or proposals to upgrade that intersection, to add some lanes to that intersection to help the existing traffic as well as the future traffic at that intersection, namely on Humeville Road. Humeville Road today is a single lane approach, and we will be looking to increase that to a 2-lane approach to accommodate not just site traffic, it's really the existing traffic that's out there today wanting to make a right turn onto Bristol Pike. And what we're hoping that also does is assist in the traffic timings at the intersection to provide more timings for Bristol Pike to alleviate vehicle queues that exist out there during the peak hours that we know about. So, in addition, I know the township just was awarded some money, grant money, to improve Bristol Pike. So there's intersection improvements that are going in place that are separate from this development. There's smart signals, so to speak, that are going in along Bristol Pike. With the installation of those traffic signals, the corridor will operate much better than it does today. And that's without us even going in.
Do you have a trip count?
I do. Keep in mind that when we performed the traffic impact study, at the time the trip generation was performed with the first plan that you saw. So it included the 104 townhouse units. So with the active adult apartments, as was discussed, the independent living, the assisted living, and the townhouse units, the weekday morning peak would generate 123 trips. And the weekday afternoon would generate 171 trips, as proposed. And I know you understand this, Councilman, but just for the public, a trip is considered an in or an out. Okay, that's not the number of vehicles, but rather the number of trips into and out of the site.
Yep, understood.
Yep.
So, and I appreciate the work that you did so far with the study, but just to clarify, so really the improvements that we're making is just that intersection there where we are expanding Humeville Road to accommodate the left or right turns, and basically is what we're doing. I think we can all, I know for a fact that Bristol Pike, there's a lot of traffic there on that road. So there's nothing as far as widening Bristol Pike to accommodate this. And to your point with the trip count, based off of just a quick math here with 605 units, 90 townhomes, and based off of the way this MUR is worded, we're still up over 1,000 vehicles that are going to be within that particular site at any given time. So it's just concerning with the amount of traffic that we could very well see, or the increase in traffic that we see out on Bristol Pike. That there could very well be additional improvements that may be needed.
Well, according to, as you know, when we perform the traffic impact studies, we look at the existing capacity that is out there today. We look at the traffic that's going to be added as a part of this development, and we determine at that point whether the intersection delay increases or decreases. If it increases to a point that is beyond a threshold that is accepted by the township, or in this case, PennDOT, since Bristol Pike is a PennDOT road, Humanville Road is a PennDOT road. So the intersection is the intersection of two state highways, but obviously the township maintains the signal. There's thresholds that we have to meet, okay, and there's criteria that we have to meet.
Right.
And based on our analysis, we meet those, criteria and thresholds with the improvements that are proposed.
And that's fine, but keep in mind is that we have a lot of traffic and you're getting on to 63 right there, and it can be pretty heavy traffic at times. What are we going to do when we see a problem there because of this particular development? I mean, it's already a problem in my mind there. So I just feel like we're going to exacerbate the situation there, and then at that point, then we have to approach the state then. Did you consider at least down the street as far as where we potentially could have a problem?
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, we have to look at, on either end of the development as well. I think there's a lot of factors that come into play when you're looking at traffic along Bristol Pike and not just, this development. So obviously we have to look at what's out there today, okay, and what could be out there as a result of what's proposed, okay? And based on those studies, I'm comfortable, in the studies that say that it can be accommodated. Now, your, traffic consultant will review it and, determine or make his own determination, okay? PennDOT will review it, make their own determination. But I can stand here comfortably and say that based on my evaluation, that I'm comfortable.
Okay. Thank you.
The amount of trips you're saying, 170 in the evening, trips mean just in or out, not just 170 cars, but in or out?
That's correct. Yeah, it could be the same vehicle going in or out.
Okay. So what would the trips be if the property was used for, you said other uses could cause?
There's a slide, correct?
Just press that. The other way. Next one.
These are just real quick, the improvements that I was referring to, that's the intersection, aerial of the intersection with the improvements in place. So the board could see what I was referring to.
So you talk about putting a turning lane on Unionville Road on the other side to make a right on Bristol Pike to go.
That is correct. That is correct, yes.
Okay, so what trip, like you said that it's less trips than other uses that could be used for the property.
Right.
So-
The graphic that you're seeing there is the trip generation in the table at the top were the numbers that I was referring to earlier, the 123 and 171. The table below is as the property is zoned today, okay, there are uses that can be developed without rezoning. We took those uses, some of which are single-family homes, child daycare facilities, as well as any type of schooling, private schools. And we looked at the trip generation that could be generated, or the site that could be generated by those uses. And we looked at the weekday AM and weekday PM. Those three uses identified would generate 465 trips in the morning.
But the
And
property is not currently zoned for single-family homes.
No.
It's zoned institutional. A child daycare center, private school, those fall within that category. Single-family homes do not.
It's just
I may
saying,
interject on that. I believe that for a number of your meetings, you were proposing a zoning that was something analogous to a single-family home. So I believe the assessment was we could have made it even more intense parking under the institutional because there's religious institutions, there's nursing facilities, there's
I mean,
medical
if you want to
facilities.
pack every square foot of the property,
Well,
sure.
that's what you could by right. But in any event.
No,
we
by
thought-
right, you cannot put single-family homes on there.
No, what I'm saying is that if what we showed you tonight was something.
If some other rezoning goes through, then somebody else can buy it right. That's not what we're here to discuss tonight, though, and that's not what this is. This is very, very misleading to us as a board and to the public.
I agree.
Okay, well.
Yeah, there's no
it's not
comparison
residential.
that has to be made. Your presentation is excellent, what you're saying. Your comparison is not necessary at all, and it's I didn't understand it either.
Our attempt, if I could, was to show something less than what all institutional.
Well, of course you're going to do that. I mean,
No,
you
no,
know that.
less traffic impact.
Well, of course you're going to do that. I mean, you
By
can't do
right, I'm
Huh?
referring to. In other words, if we had changed the single family to another type
that.
of.
We don't know what it's going to be zoned. Right now, it's zoned
It's owned institutional, so concentrate on the two
Period.
that are institutional.
Yeah, that's it.
Can you concentrate on the two that are
Correct,
institutional?
and that's fine, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
If
we're not-
we just concentrate on the two of the institutional uses.
Right.
Okay, so eliminate the single-family homes from the
Okay.
equation.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and we put on additional institutional.
Right.
Okay, so the 250 students could become 400 students, and the trip generation increases. Okay, but what we're trying to say is that
Could be, should be.
putting the institutional on site would generate as much, probably more, traffic than what's being proposed.
Other institutional uses that it's zoned for.
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
And the continuing care people that are in the one bedrooms could have some kind of a magnificent recovery, buy cars and come in and out there more than twice of what you're thinking.
I doubt it.
If it
but-
befuddles you, it should, because
Yes.
it's a joke.
Are we done questions with traffic?
I don't know.
I have a question, since we're talking about traffic somewhat. Anyway, back to the parking end of it. When you calculate the parking, are you
Yes.
utilizing sharing parking by different aspects? In other words, if you assume that the parking for the townhouses is 3.5, are you saying, well, we're using that, but we're also sharing that parking with some of the assisted living because the timing is going to be different, and we're going to use that parking for what's required for the commercial aspect of it too? Are you using share parking technique when you're calculating the parking?
I mean, shared parking can always be utilized, especially in a facility such as this. And what you're referring to is during the day for the assisted living, memory care units, there could be employees there. There could be more activity during the day, meaning there's more parking spaces being used during the day at those facilities. In the evening is when the townhouse units could see the highest demand for parking, whether those individuals come back from work where they have visitors. So yes, that area where the parking that was used for the assisted living during the day could be utilized in this case. We're, trying to work different numbers, possibly use some of those spaces, but we're not relying on it 100% to come to the numbers that Mr. Hecker referred to.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other questions in reference to anything?
I had some questions in regards to the MUR as it was written. Mr. Pizzo, maybe you can answer this question. Who drafted this document, if you could please answer that?
I believe the applicant.
Okay, great. I do have some questions, Mr. Hecker, on some of these items on the MUR. And we'll start with page 1. There's reference to special citizens. Can you, and number 1, it said, as defined in this ordinance. I did not see the definition of special citizens.
It's, I'm sorry, what was it?
Well, no, I realize that. but
It's, I think
just
it
wanna
means,
make sure
I think it
that-
means they're hoping that the people from the townhouse will live next to the people who are in memory care or assisted living.
Again, is it in this?
Why don't we
is
get
it-
some clarifications from
is
the
it in the-
applicant,
is
what
it
he
in the
meant by
MUR?
special citizens?
Well, I think that's what he meant, but we'll get him. I'm allowed to talk too, Jess. Okay?
I'm sorry, I did not hear the first part of the
Thanks,
your
thank you.
statement.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Pine?
He didn't hear your question.
Special citizen is a defined term in our zoning ordinance. Give me 1 second and I'll read it for you. Special citizen is defined as persons 55 years of age or older, or those persons defined as elderly by the United States of America or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in connection with and for purposes of housing programs, either by reason of age or physical impairment or other criteria, even though said persons are younger than 55, and their spouses. Only those persons who meet the within definition, now this goes on to discuss a different zoning district within our township. But that is the definition of a special citizen. So basically, it's a person 55 years of age or older, or a person with a particular physical impairment who may be younger than 55, and in both cases, their spouses.
Thank you. Would there be any legal implication with the townhomes being age targeted, not necessarily restricted, with the fact that this ordinance would be specific to special citizens restricting 55 or older?
I'm sorry, would you ask that question again?
No, the
townhomes are age targeted, not restricted. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So based on the fact that the wording in this MUR specifically references special citizens, could we have any legal implications to the fact that they want to have age-targeted townhomes and not necessarily restricted?
Okay. Understanding that anyone can always find a reason to bring a legal challenge to anything, but at least as this ordinance is proposed, the single-family unit, the townhouse dwelling unit component, is by its definition intended to be market rate and not age restricted. And so I don't believe there would be any impediment to the township having a combination of age restricted and non-age restricted uses within the same zoning classification. In this case, the primary use of the property or the primary designation based on the ordinance that's been proposed to you would largely be made up of individuals who would be age restricted or would fall within the handicapped persons definition. So having a non-age restricted component, I don't believe creates a problem, but that's just an off the top of the head answer.
Okay.
What is age targeted, if you can explain it to me? Tom, I guess you want to explain it to me? Age targeted, what does that mean?
Age targeted basically means that it is targeted for people who are maturing. They may not have yet hit the magic age to be a special citizen. It's intended to provide two things with the townhouse units. One is, if you call it, a feeder to the rest of the community, so that if somebody purchases a townhouse in this community and stays there and develops a need for the memory care unit or assisted care facility, and move right into it. That's number one. The other aspect of it is that in a community such as this, that is primarily geared towards special citizens as already defined in your ordinance, you'll find that the vast number of people who would purchase it are couples without children because of the types of activities, amenities that are provided are not really geared toward children. So it's really intended, I guess, to complement the intended use of the senior community.
Okay,
So
good.
so this would be something you would make your sales force aware of?
Yes.
I don't know how you,
Yes,
like,
that's
I agree with Ed. How could you do that? How could you do that? If I'm 23 and I
There's-
want to buy a house in there, I can buy a house in there, correct?
You can buy a townhouse, yes.
Yeah,
You can
right.
buy that, yeah. I mean, there's
So
nothing legally
What's the
that,
terminology of, I don't understand the targeted part of it. then.
there's nothing legally that you could do to prevent that. But as a practical matter, And I'll give you an example. I live in a townhouse community. We just celebrated our 10th year in this townhouse community. It is not part of a senior community. And the people who live in this community are people like my wife and myself who decided it was time to get rid of the big house and move to a community where we didn't have to worry about maintenance, where things were vertical, and in this case with an elevator, instead of being spread out horizontally. And out of the 53 units in our development, there are only 5 that are occupied, maybe 6 that are occupied with couples with children. I think last count there were a total of 7 children, and I think there's now 8 on the way, which was a shock to my wife and very disappointing to my wife. The first couple of Halloweens that we spent in our community. She was so used to handing out 120 candy bars in the course of a Halloween evening, so we wound up going to our daughters so she could still do that. But that's what happens in townhouses. You're going to get the folks who are looking to uncomplicate their lives, and you may get some young couples with children, without children, or very small children, who are not going to want to live in a townhouse. Eventually want to go to a single-family home. But because of where this is located, we can advertise the availability and the I guess the natural flow between the townhouse and having the senior community there and all the activities and advantages of being part of a senior community as well.
Mr. Hager.
I understand what you're saying.
Under the statement of purpose of objectives, number 3, let me read it to you. To provide for an integrated community of mixed housing types which would minimize suburban sprawl. And to Mr. Sloan's point, I'd just like to understand how you believe we're talking over 700 or 700 units, how you believe this is going to minimize suburban sprawl.
In other places.
So in looking at this project again, and in looking at what you could get under the existing institutional, forget single families, because we know that that's not relevant at this point in time. But there are a lot of uses already existing under the ordinance that would result in more development, or conceivably more development, more population. You know, take a look. I don't know if this is a potential site for a satellite campus for any type of school, college, or what have you, that kind of thing. So the intent here, when you say about suburban sprawl, is really to minimize, because don't forget, one of the most important features of this project is the ability to reuse a lot of the existing structures on this property without constructing anything new. You know, the chapel, the mother house, the crypt, all those buildings are going to remain and become part of this without having to build anything new. That'll all be done internally.
And I understand that, but there was very few people living there at that time. I mean, we're talking about again, 700 units.
Is it 700 units? I thought it was 6.
No, that's again, we're counting each bed, you know, as a unit, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, all right.
Well, to Mr. Tukmajian's point, though, if you flick back to the slides near the beginning, what is the intended use of the existing structure? You know, we keep talking about all these uses of building new things. We're building townhouses, we're building apartment buildings, we're building an assisted living facility. So what is going to be the use, the dedicated use of the existing structure?
Len?
The reuse of the existing buildings at this time is to be determined. We do not have a set program, a development program for those buildings. We evaluated them for each of the uses we proposed this evening, the independent living, the assisted living, and the various programmatic development units, and the inefficiencies of the mother house and the existing buildings were not economically viable. But because we respect the history and the spirituality of the property there was no way we were going to tear those buildings down. So we're going to keep the chapel, we're going to keep the crypt, we're going to keep the mission center, the convent, the mother house, and we'll find uses for them so that they will be viable, and we will be turning the lights on, where they'll be open to the community for public meetings, where they'll be part of the recreational facilities for others to use. We will find the uses for them. That's our commitment.
Per this ordinance in front of us tonight, do any of those potential uses include, or are they available to you per this ordinance of residences, restaurants, salons, pubs? Any of those, are they available to be used in that existing structure?
The intent was, including those uses in the ordinance, was to provide services for the people who reside there without having to leave the facility.
I completely understand the intent of why they're in there.
So the answer is yes.
So yes, so if down the road, while you don't have an intended use today, and I understand the reason that you don't, you could tomorrow all of a sudden say, okay, I'm going to put a restaurant in the mother house, or I'm going to make that into 10 new units, residential units.
For the use of the residents, primary use of the residents.
That's right.
Is that in the ordinance that the use of these ancillary commercial accessory activities is primarily for the residents only?
Correct.
Yes. Go ahead.
To be clear to your point and your question, we would not be opening up a restaurant, a standalone restaurant in the mother house for use outside of the community that we are proposing to develop. We would not be opening up a pharmacy that would be for the traveling public. It would be, whatever we would develop would be part of the community and development program that we're proposing for the overall campus.
I understand that is your intent. However, this ordinance in front of us tonight does not bound you to that. Am I correct, Mr. Hecker?
Yeah, there is no limiting language. I understand that. And that is, that's
You
an
could put a freestanding restaurant there at that point if you wanted to.
well, it's listed under accessory. So I don't know that that would meet that definition of accessory, but I will say to you, that's an easy fix.
Well, and if
We
I could hop
talked
in,
about that.
if I could hop in here.
talked about that
The CCRC provisions of the zoning ordinance states explicitly and specifically that these accessory uses in that district are limited to the residents of the facility. And they're not to be advertised or open to the public at large. So again, as Mr. Hecker said, that is something that we would probably want to insert into this particular section of the ordinance, into section 310.8, just language that says the accessory uses would be limited to the residents of the property, and that the operators of those accessory uses would not be advertising their services to the public at large.
And
I
Mr.
agree.
Hecker, you'd be okay with adding that to the
Yes.
zoning? thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's your intention, we understand that. And we don't,
If he's gonna
we're
add
not
it.
saying that you are going to do anything other than that, but once you put a zoning in place, anyone could buy that.
Yeah,
property.
that had to be added.
No, I understand. It's a good point. Absolutely. We can say yes and be the most honest people in the world here, but, somebody else might feel differently. So
Exactly.
let's
I have
put
a
it,
question.
let's put it in the ordinance.
I have a question on section 310-10, section 3A. That's on page 4. Use and dwelling unit mix. You have the minimum of 30% and a maximum of 80% of the units within the community shall be a senior independent living campus units. That's a pretty wide range. I mean, if I went back from school and told my parents I'm getting either a 30 or an 80 on my test mark, they'd say.
The whole idea with providing a minimum and maximum is to guarantee the incorporation of other uses into it.
But what I'm saying to you, shouldn't there be a spelled out, as we have had in the past, a spelled out percentage of each use and what the maximum minimum could be for each use? independent use, townhouse, independent apartments. I mean, there should be a specific percentage of the ancillary uses, as opposed to just saying 30 to 80% and flip a coin and see what it's going to be. That's what I think.
Can
I think the intention of providing a range as at this stage, this is a process that's going to take some time to complete. It may very well be that there is a stronger demand for the memory care aspect or assisted living, and we might want to increase that percentage. So I'm not quite sure how to address your concern with wanting to maintain some flexibility depending upon the need.
Well, how much flexibility, though, Mr. Hecker? I mean, just to touch on Mr. Kisselback's points, if you look at the next page, there's a point about the total density having a maximum restriction of 15 units. And then B also notes anywhere between the attached single-family buildings shall contain a minimum of 2 units and a maximum of 5 dwelling units per building for the townhomes. It gives you a lot of flexibility to change the land development plan before it even comes in front of us, correct?
To change the plan that we submit to you as a land development plan, yes.
So you could present whatever you wanted up this evening, but you could change that.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. For the reason I said, just because you go through this process and we don't know what the ultimate demand is going to be. So we were trying to provide some building
And I
flexibility.
recognize that, but you have to understand that I'm making a big decision as far as
Understand.
changing the zoning here. So to allow this kind of flexibility, and let's just say you decide not to develop that property, there could be someone else that could come in and they have much leeway for what they want to do.
If I may comment with regards to your question. With respect to the townhomes, we come here tonight committing that no more than 90 units would be developed at that site. That's a restriction that would run with the land or could be somehow incorporated in the ordinance with regards to a certain percentage of the overall density. With regards to the balance of the site, that is market-driven. I've done this before, and so have my partners. There could be a stronger demand for independent living today or a greater demand for assisted living tomorrow. Memory care could be important, a component of a development today, and maybe twice or 3 times as much tomorrow. That has to have some flexibility in it. However, as we all know, this is the beginning of the journey, not the end. So as we go through the land development process, you will see what we propose, and you will have the input and authorship to what ultimately will be the development. We're not going to sit here for 2, 3, 4, 5 years to determine the development program. We will be back very quickly with a project that will be very similar to what we've shown tonight. The change program that has reduced the density of townhomes, opened up the acreage, and provided some other improvements that we think was our efforts to try to work with the stakeholders and neighbors and finding a path together.
But I think you could offer to us, even in general terms, a more specific percentage if, for example, you had attached single-family units and say that's going to be, I'm not going to give you figures, but say a certain percentage. And then if you took the, instead of having them separated as dependent living, personal care, assisted living, memory care, you could put several of those together saying that would be 50% of what we're doing, and you can change them any way you want it as the market would change. But we'd still have a figure saying, to me, the difference between extended care and dependent care is pretty darn close. Memory care, to me, that's the same. That's extended care to individuals. Different concepts of it, but it's the same type of a thing as compared to independent living, which is completely different, as compared to townhouses, which is also different. So you have the townhouse concept, you have the care unit, which could be a number of percentages. It could be a number of different things. It could be, like I said, scaled nursing, I don't know, personal care, dependent care. They could fall under one category and give you a larger percentage to offer to us to say, that could be 50% of what we're doing. I don't want to make up numbers, but it could be whatever you would think it would be. And then the ancillary things could be another percentage, a smaller percentage, so we know that's going to be in the realm of 10%. Then the existing buildings, we know that's going to be relative to whatever the percentage would be. And we know that you're going to keep them there because it's got to be a percentage of what's happening. So you can't take them out, or someone in a later date can't take them out because they got to be there. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah, can I say something for a second? Because I haven't much time to talk. But So you're saying you would restrict the main thing is that townhouses, okay, whether you market them or not towards a certain age group, legally, anybody can buy the townhouses.
Yep.
Okay, so I understand the thought pattern that most people who are starting young families might not want to live there, but they legally can. So there's townhouses open to everybody. So I do understand that some people are going to want to buy a townhouse because their father or grandfather's in assisted living and they want to live close to be able to visit and stuff. So that's possible, but that's not a legal restriction. So you're saying that they would restrict the number of townhouses even in the ordinance to 90. Like Mr. Kisselback said, I mean, the 55 and olders are deeded to, they need to be deeded to not only stay 55, but also limited, that you can't build any more of those. I mean, that's a pretty lot already. And then you can have a separate group that's assisted living, memory care, skilled care. Those people are the ones that, I mean, to me, that doesn't matter to me what the percentage of those people are, depending on what care people need. Now, I'm assuming, too, that the chapel will never be used for a restaurant or a diner.
No.
So that would either be an interfaith prayer or some type of facility that would stay the chapel in its present existence.
Yes.
And then, is there any way to put in an ordinance that those historical buildings would be part of the deed, that you couldn't remove those historical buildings without permission from the township or council to have those buildings removed? Because again, I would trust Len that he's not going to knock down a chapel or use it for a restaurant. But, sure. But you could sell the project 10, 15 years from now, and someone else could say, you know what, I'm done with this chapel. I'm knocking it down. You know.
That's right.
So that needs to be restricted and in writing, that no one now or in the future can mess with that.
Exactly, and that would be a restriction that would also run with the land in perpetuity.
Yeah.
So you could never tear down the mother house or the convent or the crypt or the chapel. That's right.
Yeah. Now, I all know that we're going to have a chance to speak on this to the public. The Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament were there for 100 years. And in a perfect world, I wish they were still there. Okay, and I wish Mother Catherine was still there, but she's dead. It's owned by the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. There's been some confusion that's owned by the Archdiocese. The Archdiocese just took control of Mother Catherine's crypt down at the cathedral because it's their responsibility as a saint in their Archdiocese. But the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament own the property. They did donate land to build Cornwall's Fire Company. They donated the land that Holy Ghost preps on. They donated the land at St. Francis, the vocational school, and the orphanage that was there when we were kids. So they've given a lot to our community. We just want to make sure that we're not overloading. We want to preserve it and not do it the right way. You know, starting out with the chapel, there's 60 or 80 sisters that are in a nursing home that were transferred out there. That place has been vacant for 2 or 3 years. Now, my mother worked there for almost 25 years and ran the infirmary, the nursing home, and you know, my great aunts are buried there. So my great aunts are buried in the cemetery, which you would take care of forever, right?
That's right.
So we're taking care of a cemetery, a chapel, a mother house. You're not going to turn it into like a disco or something, right?
No, we were not. And if I could, I don't believe the sisters are here this evening because they were concerned about the foul weather.
And they chose you for that purpose.
They did, and I would offer the following. As Mr. Hecker pointed out earlier this evening, they hired a national firm out of Chicago that went on a multi-year search, that ultimately they decided that not only did we have the depth of experience, knowledge, and talent to execute this project from idea to reality, but they knew we were committed personally and spiritually to work this forward as best as we could. And I will share with you that I offered to the sisters to stay there in perpetuity until there were no more sisters, and that we would allow the mother house and the facilities for them to use as long as there was a Sister of the Blessed Sacrament. They said, thank you, Len, but they chose to go somewhere else because of their age. They wanted to be cared for. That's why the Liberally Lutheran organization is now caring for the sisters.
Okay, so you were willing to restrict the number of townhouses. You're willing to deed the 55 and older facility, not only in number, but in forever that's a 55 and older, okay? And then your percentages would only change within your age care.
Right.
So I understand the special citizen, so you're saying that the townhouses, someone could want to live, it has nothing to do with the townhouse, it's just the purpose that possibly someone would want to live there whose relative is in assisted living, for instance.
That or
That's
they-
not a guarantee, that's just a possibility.
No, but it is a possibility. That or the fact that they want to live there because someday they can move across campus to one of the other facilities.
But there are restricted age groups, 55 and older legally and assisted living legally, but there's no legal status of targeted people,
Yeah.
targeted age group. It's illegal. Okay, I mean, you can market them, but
that's
you
exactly
have to
right.
sell to anybody.
That's right.
So 90, 20-year-olds could buy in there if they wanted to. They'd have to have the money, but they'd have to have the money, but I doubt they would, but they might, you know? But we need to restrict that to no more than 90, if that, you know?
Yeah, and I think, as following up on Mr. Kisselback's suggestion, I think the way that we do that is we can limit the number by a percentage. So some creative math, if you took the number of acres, which is 43.5 times the permitted density, and divided that by 90, I think that works out to about 13.8 or 13.9%. So if we took rounded it out to 14%, we could say that the townhouses could not exceed 14% of
Okay, and I have a question, one more
permitted
question for the
density.
traffic person.
Yes.
Can you come up to the front? How does the age-restricted portion of the development, the age-restricted, not the townhouses, the age-restricted, and especially the assisted living, memory care, reduce the trips? Is there, like, if you have, you're saying 90 townhouses, you're saying approximately 220 at least 55 and olders, right? So the rest of it is about 300 assisted living or memory care. What does those not being townhouses or not being 55 and olders reduce your trips by?
Well, I guess,
Do you understand the
Just to
question?
make sure the math is correct, it's
Yeah.
260 active adult leased units,
Okay, so 260.
90 townhomes, and 255 combination of independent living,
Okay.
assisted living, memory care.
Thank
That's
you.
the development program that we presented this evening.
Okay, so the 255, how much does that reduce the trips by? As opposed to some other usage, you know? Like, because someone's saying there's 600 or 700 units, but those people, they tend not to drive as much, I would think.
correct. I guess let me answer it this way. Hopefully this will answer your question. An age-qualified home, the 55 plus, would generate approximately 0.25 trips per unit, okay? When you go into an independent living facility, that 0.25 would drop to about 0.15,
Right.
okay, per unit, okay, trip per unit. And then when you go to a assisted living or memory care, it drops even more to below 0.1.
Yeah, that would basically just be guests visiting, I would think, right?
Correct, or employees and so forth.
Right.
So that's how it changes. So I
Now, are
can't,
those numbers industry standard, or is that
Yes,
just
it
how
is.
you calculate them in your company?
no, this is based on numbers that are generated by ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, so
Okay.
all of our data comes from
Yeah,
there.
and I agree.
Now, some of
That's what
our-
I wanted to know the
Yep.
exact figures that they use.
Right.
for
Some of
that
our
type
past
thing.
studies have been submitted to ITE to be used,
Okay.
but it is a national standard.
Just make sure.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from the council before we open up the?
Yes, I have a couple questions. Can we go back, let's see, one slide maybe two? On
Land
the,
plan, concept plan?
please. Yeah, the overall. One more, let's look at the older one first. So on this plan, you can very clearly see towards the bottom, there are 1, 2, 3 apartment buildings. And this is the active adult 55 plus age restricted apartments, 260 units, correct?
Correct.
In the revised plan on the next page, did you alter those at all?
No,
Okay. Can you go back again to that? So if you look at the middle unit all the way down on the bottom of the screen there, and that bottom corner is very, very close to I-95. I guess, first of all, how tall are those buildings going to be?
4-story over parking.
So ground floor will be parking and then, right, okay. You keep skipping ahead. Can you go back, please? I want to, okay. So that bottom corner on the previous slide, that bottom corner, somebody who resides in those units, in those corner units, is going to be right on top of I-95 essentially.
How close is it to I-95? do you
Yeah.
know?
I think Dave could more accurately answer that question.
But they're not using that. They're using the other one.
No, the 55 is older back there.
The distance. Bear with us a moment, please.
Is that 95 in the lower right-hand corner?
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, so it looks like it's
Bottom of the
going,
screen is 95, top of the screen.
yeah, it looks like it's going away from it a little bit right there.
I see it, but I thought
Is there another question while Dave is researching that?
Well, while he's researching that, I'd ask you, and I know you currently live in the township.
I didn't think to.
Keep working. Yes.
I know you currently live in the township. If you could no longer live in your house, would you live in that apartment right there above I-95?
I would. And the reason why I would is because not unlike so many in my age group that start with a larger home, have the kids, they have the backyard, and then they want more independence and they don't want the care of exterior and snow clearing and what have you, so they may
Sure.
move to a townhome, and then even that move to something that's even more flexible.
Oh, I
a rental unit.
understand the intent of the whole concept of the townhomes to the apartments to the independent living facility. But that corner unit right there on top of I-95, one of the busiest highway probably that in this country that runs north to south along the entire east coast of the U.S. You want to live right on top of I-95?
I certainly could.
Can I
Particularly with
Can I
the
jump in on
landscaping
that?
buffer,
2 seconds.
passive and active recreation of a community like this.
On the
Where I
fourth
could walk
floor,
45-acre site every morning with my wife and the dog, sure.
on the fourth floor, and let's entertain this theory for a little bit, and excuse me if I make generalities, but okay, so senior citizens are living there, maybe they'll go to bed a little bit early, maybe they'll lay down for a nap at 5 o'clock during rush hour on top of I-95.
Possible.
Well, to
I
be
will
fair,
share with you
to
that-
be fair, there's plenty of $500,000-$600,000 townhouses in Philadelphia right on top of 9. Literally
That's
on top of
great,
9.
that's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about this right here. We're talking about building
No, but I'm
3
saying there's-
apartment buildings
Well, hold on.
adjacent to
I'm just saying, there's
I-95.
townhouses that are on top of 95.
I understand
Well, why
that.
don't you compare it to a development that we have here in Bensalem, where we have the same problem, right? We have Chancellor's Glen that's back there, that they were promised a wall along the turnpike.
Who was promised a wall?
The development was, and the problem is it got delayed because of the turnpike project. And we still
No,
have,
I back up to Turnpike.
we still have.
I back up to the Turnpike.
We still have
My
complaints.
house backs up to the Turnpike.
Okay.
And they're getting a wall when they're done with the bridges,
Understood.
okay?
So-
And they're done with the bridge when they put another lane in,
Yep.
okay? So that's when they'll get a wall. And the same time that Chancellor Glen gets a wall is when Salem Point gets a wall and Barnsley East gets a wall behind my house.
So then is there a wall planned along 95 for this
No,
development?
there is not a wall plan.
Okay.
But I will
It's not
share with
I mean, are you familiar with the Chancellor's Glen project?
I am not, but I will
Okay.
share with you that I have personally developed over 5,000 units of residential, including projects along 95, along major thoroughfares. I'm not unfamiliar with sound attenuation and exterior walls, so I can assure you, these projects have to work. They have to be a desirable place for people to live. So we wouldn't be developing them if it wasn't a project that we knew could work for the community and for the end user.
And I agree.
Can I see the revised one up there, Matt? If you can bounce back to that one for one moment? I just made a mistake.
Yeah, it's a 3.
Okay.
Sorry, and I'm sorry, Jesse, I didn't mean to take away from your points if you want to.
No, but I
proceed.
have one more point. I agree with Ed that the people, the residents of Chancellor Glen, apparently, I've spoken to several of them, including people I know, but were misled by apparently the person who sold them the property, that there would be a wall, and they expected it sooner than it was going to come. But that was from, I'm assuming that you're not going to tell people that you're renting to, that you're building a wall.
We are
sound
not
wall.
building a wall.
Okay.
So there's no sound wall proposed along the I-95
There is no
corridor?
sound wall proposed along 95, nor Nor do we believe that a sound wall is necessary. I respectfully would submit.
Mr. Ponce, these are rental units, correct?
Yes, sir.
They're not purchasing them to live in them, they're renting them.
That's
So
correct.
if they move in there and they don't like the sound or whatever, they move out.
And actually, that's exactly the point. That's the difference in the dynamics today of the senior housing or the independent living or active adult mentality of the end users like Tom and myself in the past. People want to downsize, but they don't want to provide in some of the past years' developments where you sell your house, you provide a large contribution to a senior community, and then you're there till God calls you home. In this case, you have that flexibility to stay or leave.
Lived in a unit like that down in Florida, where they had all the money they sold their house where they had to give to them. They lived in a regular unit. They went from the regular unit into assisted living. They no longer drove when they got into assisted living, because if you're in assisted living, it's because you need assistance,
need help.
which in most cases you can't drive. And then they went into they didn't have the third part, they went into a nursing home
Skilled
after
care.
that. But these are rental units. They're not the purchasing units. You're not promising a wall. I'm just
That's
throwing this
correct.
out there. So if they don't like living there, they can move.
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, that's all.
And just for the record, it's 90 feet to the right of way, 120 feet to the edge of the carway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Is this project viable without adding 260 apartments to the project?
It is not. It is not.
Are you aware that, and I took maybe 5 minutes prior to this meeting to do a little bit of research, and I found at least 2 incidents just in 2018 of skilled nursing facilities that have declared bankruptcy.
We are not a skilled care facility, and I'm not surprised to hear that, because that is actually the trend that has been happening over the past 5-10 years. People are not living in these senior communities at a younger age. They're living at an older age. And oftentimes, once they've lived in an assisted living or a memory care, they're very close to passing. So there aren't as much of a demand for skilled care facilities. So that's accurate.
Mike, can you speak to the company who's going to actually horse?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, he was sick this evening, the
What is
president.
their
The
financial
Horst
stability?
Company is a 200-year company in the Lancaster area. And the president of Horst Senior Living, his family are one of the pioneers in senior living in the United States. Very well respected, a very strong operator, and has been our partner. We've been working with them for over 2.5 years.
And are they going to own the facility or just operate it?
They will be the operator, and I will consider them being a partner with me in this senior facility.
But you will essentially lease it to them?
No, the operator means they would work as my
Okay,
manager.
so
I
you
am-
will lease to the individual tenants?
That is correct, although I'm considering a joint venture with the company as well.
Okay, and what about the apartment buildings?
Apartment I will own myself.
You will own and lease yourself?
That's correct.
Do you do that kind of stuff now? Do you rent
Yes.
units?
I do.
I believe you rent units down in the
I
city?
do, yes.
College dorms and things like that?
Just for the past 11 years, number of apartment
So
buildings.
it's not something that you're already experienced with and that you do?
Many of the 5,000 units approximately that I've developed have been apartments or condominiums.
Did you build apartments at St. Joe's, I believe?
I did.
Told me, yeah.
And this is your company, Aquinas Realty?
That's correct.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Can I, Mr. Ponce, can I ask you a quick question in regards to viability?
Yeah.
Just to touch on that point, why do you believe that such a large retirement community would be viable here? And we're talking about a large plan that's really in between Bristol Pike and I-95. And the reason why I ask is I also did some research, and it appears as if a lot of people are now looking for warmer weather. They're looking for locations on golf courses. They're looking for a mix like this that's not necessarily in such what we would consider as a particular type project along a busy corridor. And just to note that, and I know that New Jersey is having some of those issues. And just to read this real quick, this is an article I received I got from Money Magazine. For one, retirees here are choosing to move to lower cost states, leaving a glut of age-restricted housing in the Garden State. It's over in New Jersey. So I'm just trying to understand why you feel that this would be a viable project.
Well, there's several parts to that response or answer that I'll attempt to share with you. It's easy to accommodate the very high-end users that would enjoy a golf course community in a sunny area of the United States that could afford that type of environment and use. And there are those that are a very humble means that our country provides for affordable senior housing. But the overwhelming majority of the middle income folks in our country, and those of us here in Bensalem, this is exactly the type of development that would work perfectly. We don't undertake this because we hope that it will work. We do all the right homework with all the right research and the market studies that tell us what the demand drivers are, what units will sell for the townhomes, what they could lease for the independent living, and what we underwrote to was literally the mean between the high and low of each of the uses, whether it was active adult, independent living, assisted living, memory care. That homework was done, and that's why we come here tonight knowing that together, a project with this development program that must include the active adult leased units is viable.
Okay, thank you.
Do you think that people that would live in these facilities, this facility, will live there because their family lives close by in Bensalem, in Bristol Township, in Northeast Philadelphia, in the surrounding area, that they might want to live there for that reason?
No doubt.
Yeah, I had people, of course, approach me who were concerned about the traffic, but I also had people approach me who are inquiring about their relatives' ability to, be able to have access to it. So what is the, is it just an open thing for there's no restrictions as far as people on certain insurances or income to get it? How do you apply
That's
to get
correct.
into how do you apply to get into assisted living? Is every person given a chance according to their means?
Of course.
Right, so and a local.
And also, I want to share that this will not be a gated community such that no one but those that are living there can use the property. It's open to the public. People want to walk the site, enjoy the chapel or the bucolic area, the passive recreation. It's for everyone to enjoy. It's our project.
I'm sorry. When you, sorry, Jessica.
No, it's all right.
When you note enjoying the chapel, I mean, or your earlier testimony was that it was TBD.
I can assure you that we are not going to repurpose the chapel for
Oh, I
anything other
realize that,
than.
but
He meant
there's
the
nothing-
mother house. He meant the mother house, I think. He didn't mean the chapel itself.
Okay, but there's nothing that really restricts any particular overhaul within the chapel itself, correct? I mean, you could go in there and really renovate that chapel.
You could, yes.
Okay.
Have you
Thank you.
considered with any of the historic structures, placing them on the National Register of Historic Places?
We're working with our historic team member, and this is not the first project we worked on together, so we're evaluating that as we speak.
Okay, because my understanding is that has to be done by the property owner. So that's not even something that we as a board have authority over. That'd be something that you would have to commit to.
So, well, and I will share with you that we're committing in perpetuity to not tear down those historic buildings, so I can see a path forward as you've described.
So, Mr. Fonzie, you're saying if somebody gets married and they want to have pictures taken on the facility, as I did when I was married, that would be allowed to be able to be done and use that? That would be one of the uses that the public could use the property for, having a beautiful historic building behind them, the trees, the things of that nature, that they could still go do that.
As I did when I got married and had our wedding photos on the property as well.
Can you please flip forward one slide?
The elevation?
Yes. This elevation shows the townhouses in the
No.
center of the,
Does not show the townhouse.
no, not, that's just the skilled nursing, I'm sorry, the assisted living facility.
Excuse me. Ma'am. Pardon me. The intent of this rendering is what we hope would show you and the community at large that by opening up the view corridor of the acreage, pardon me, the green that you see to the top of the screen. If you are standing at Bristol Pike and you are looking towards the mother house, this is what you would see. Pardon me.
Would you also see the apartment buildings behind it?
I don't know. What are you, Peter?
Pretty far back.
The apartment buildings, the site does slope towards 95. So it is possible that behind portions of the assisted living memory care, you may see a roof line. But the grade does fall substantially from the elevation level here down to where the active adult leased units are.
Now, the third, if you flip back one screen, the third apartment building is directly adjacent to what I think is the independent living facility. And looks like that has a direct line of sight to Bristol Pike there through the open space. So you
Well,
would
it
also
may,
be able
but-
to see that?
It may, but let me
Or does
share-
that also dip down in elevation?
Exactly. The property slopes from Bristol Pike to 95. This is-
No,
If I may?
I'm talking about from the roof line of the independent living facility to the 5-story building behind it that is directly adjacent. Would you see that peeking out over top of the independent living facility?
No, because the independent living facility is 4 stories itself.
Okay.
But you do, I know you are an engineer, but I will share for everyone's benefit that the blue to the lower right and the blue to the lower left is because the natural topography of the property slopes from Bristol Pike downward towards 95. So the views that you see, which is probably why you probably wouldn't see the active adult, which is why we also placed the active adult there, the views would be obscured because the ground slopes down as you traverse the property.
Okay.
Thank you for the candy, whoever gave me that.
There's a hill that goes down there, and then it flattens out a little bit. That's where Holy Providence School was, there.
That's right.
That building. Okay, do you have any other questions? And we could open to the public and see if we, and then we'll probably take a quick break. But any other questions? We're good? Okay, is there anybody from the public that would want to speak for or against this? And if you can keep, we have a decent crowd, so if you can keep your comments, precise, if you can, to the best of your ability. And then, if someone else made the same point, if you can just let them speak for you, I'd appreciate it. But anybody has a right to speak, so if people want to come for or against the project. Yeah, come up in line, identify yourself, your name and address, and then you can.
I'm John Pedrick, 936 Langstroth Lane, Bensalem, PA. I live on Langstroth Lane. My front porch is approximately 20 feet from the property line of Mother Catherine
I know what it
Drexel.
is, yep.
Throughout this presentation, we've talked about Bristol Pike, and it was my understanding at one of the last meetings that the entrances and the meeting that the neighbors had with the developer, that the entrances to Langstroth Lane were going to be closed, A, B, and C. B happens to be right in front of my driveway. So I was very concerned when there was a slide back there where A, B, and C exits and entrances led off the property back onto Langstroth Lane. So was this reintroduced in the plan, or is it taken out of the plan?
No, I think what he said was there's A, B, and C, and they'll decide which one they're going to use, and they're not sure at this point, but they want to make sure that the neighbors...
The neighbors wanted access to get out to the
I
light.
thought I was talking...
We
Yeah, I'm
don't
sorry,
use
I'm
it.
sorry.
There's only 4 houses.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
approximately 4
Yeah,
houses.
but I think he was
Lang-
trying to make it accessible to you, so you can utilize the exit entrance onto Bristol Pike, make it easier for you rather than coming up Langstroth and trying to hop onto either Huonville Road or Bristol Pike. I think that was the point. That's what I had taken from it anyway.
I
Am I
don't
correct?
believe
Do you
it.
want to bring up Joe?
Hey, Len, can you address answer his question, please, quickly? Sure. What is the purpose of I understand, like Mr. Kisselback said, the same thing,
Why don't you put it on
that
the
there was
screen?
that you were providing an entrance, so the people from that street could get on and go out at the light. Is that correct or not?
Correct. I think one of the concerns that we heard from the neighbors during the meetings or the request was, will we have access to the traffic signal in the future? So what this slide is trying to show is options, alternatives.
That doesn't mean.
A, B, and C. It does
But
not
you're-
mean
But also, you're not going to shut off the end of Langford, so he can go out Langford still, right?
we're not touching
Right.
Langford
Yeah, so
at
you
all.
can still go out the front of your house if they can prefer that.
That's correct. And A, B, and C is only an option. It's
So when I
not-
come out of my house, I make a left, go to Bristol Pike,
You
and I
can do
make
that.
a
if you
right.
want. Yeah. You can
Easy
still do
access,
that.
In and out.
But the rest of your neighbors could go into the development and go out at the light if they wanted to.
Yeah, the other two neighbors.
Right.
And-
Well, I think there's more houses back there.
And just to be
Some
clear,
side
it'll not
streets.
be all three locations.
Yeah, it's one location, right?
One
You gotta pick one location.
And the other concern I had was, with the apartment buildings, are you showing this revised plan as taking out the apartment buildings?
No.
That was a misunderstanding.
No,
They're still there.
that's what I specifically asked, and the apartment buildings are staying at 260 units in 3 separate apartment buildings, is what's shown on this. It's cut off at the bottom there, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's what I misunderstood too when I was saying.
Yeah.
I thought it was going, when I had asked that.
But the apartment buildings are still in the plan.
So we're looking at 88 units at the bottom of Langstroth Lane.
I believe
Yeah,
that's what the
That's the
proposed,
southern border.
just in that one building.
In that one
I know, but
building,
there's
88.
there's no access from that road to the apartment building. Can you speak to that, please? Hold on a second. Is there access, if you are on the side street, it's Langford, is that?
Langstroth.
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 Langstroth. If you go down Langstroth, you can't go all the way down Langstroth like you can now and make a left at the bottom of the street and get to the apartments. Can
That's
you?
correct. The only way to access the proposed apartment building would be through the internal road system.
Right, okay. Like now, I think you can drive straight down, there's a parking lot at the bottom and stuff.
The parking lot at the bottom,
Yeah, but
yeah.
they're gonna cut that off, where you're not gonna be able to go across there.
Ed Ives, Bensalem, 1555 Tyson Avenue. I was wondering where you're saying down at the bottom, at that parking lot, my house backs up to that property. Where is these apartments going to be? In my backyard? When I go sit in my backyard, am I going to be looking at the back of a bunch of apartments? See, they have C driveway there. That runs right down our street.
Okay, one second. Can you put the thing up there, the map that has the apartments on it so we can see where the apartments are?
I mean, with that there, we
Okay,
can't
let me
see.
see that's where they are.
What are the apartments? The blue part?
The light blue. The dark blue are are
So that
retention
light blue is going to be in my backyard?
basins.
Literally in
I
my
don't know.
backyard?
Across that parking lot, yeah.
Yeah, well, you see them little trees that go up next and you see that little house?
We're talking about the.
That's my house. And you're going to have them trees in them apartments. When I walk out to my back of my property, I'm going to be looking at the back of their buildings.
That's what they're proposing.
That's what they're
The front of the
proposing.
building. You look at the front, but.
And what about all the wild animals, the deer and everything? They have nothing for that. They have no consideration for the wildlife. I mean, it's ridiculous here. And they're gonna bring all that traffic right through our neighborhood. We have that daycare center, the Bright Care Center over there. All their traffic comes flying through that one little street. There's 3 houses on it. And we have 40, 50 cars through there in the morning, and they're saying 100 and some
No, they're
cars?
saying that road's gonna be cut off if you look at it, that those trees behind your house.
Yeah.
To go all the way across, that's the end of the street right there. You can't drive down your street, that side street, and go onto that property. So they'll have to go through the whole community to get to that apartment complex.
So when I come down, if I come from, say the southern part, and come up past my house, when I get the Langstroth there, I can go down on the Langstroth, or is that going to be cut off?
Langstroth was still maintained, Ed. It's still going to be there, but there'll be no accessibility to the apartments.
Onto Langstroth?
Yes.
Right, none whatsoever.
Okay.
Right.
So they won't be driving through our neighborhood
No,
like
no.
the daycare center
No,
is, the
not at
Bright and
all.
all that?
Not at all.
But I'll have them 80-some units right behind my house?
You will have that amount of
If
units
this was
behind you.
approved, yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much.
That's correct.
Hope it's not approved.
Good evening. My name is Danielle Lear Shagrin, and I just moved out of Bensalem last month. But for the majority of my life, my address was 1708 George Avenue, and that's where my family, my parents and my siblings still reside. I would like to make two statements this evening. I have my own prepared, but I did promise another Bensalem resident that I would make her statement as well, if that's permitted. She was here at the last meeting, and unfortunately she couldn't be here tonight. Her name is Joan Schoen, so if it's permitted, I'd like to read her statement first. Mayor, Council, good evening. Unfortunately, I have come before you tonight to voice my opposition against the plan to build upon the Catherine Drexel property. In addition to this tract, there are 3 developments being built as we speak, namely Waterside and State Road, which seems to have halted for some reason, Victory Square on Galloway, and another on Cornwalls Ave. My question to you is, when will all of this building be enough? Your slogan is building a better Bensalem. Yes, you are certainly building, but it's not better for the residents, and it's adding to the nightmare that Andalusia has become. Speaking of traffic, let me give an example of what traffic is like on an almost daily basis. On a good day, my commute from Andalusia to Bristol is 10 minutes, since it's only 7 miles door to door. But coming home down 95 to Woodhaven, it's slow getting off on Route 13. I see traffic already backed up on the underpass, and it only gets worse from there. I will sit in bumper-to-bumper traffic for the next 5 lights as I coast down Bristol Pike to Tennis Ave. Am I in the clear? No. I coast down Tennis, where I wait for 2 to 3 traffic signals to turn onto State Road. And well, you get the picture. My ask, since you're dead set on building on this property, is 1, save a sanctuary, a peaceful section where the deceased sisters currently lie, and 2, if you can set aside a walking path circling the property to give the residents who voted for you a place to enjoy. Thank you. And that is from Joan Schoen.
Okay, well, the cemetery is going to maintain forever.
Right, as I said, she was here at the last meeting, and her statements were prepared before
Like I said,
some of these concerns were addressed.
I understand, thank you. You have something else to say? Or?
I do, yeah. And some of my concerns have been addressed as well, and I really appreciate that, but I still think it needs to be just said for the record that some of the concerns I have. I grew up in Bensalem, within walking distance of the Mother House of the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. My grandmother and aunt were dedicated members of the Honor Guard. I have happy memories of crafting with the sisters in the summer and walking on the beautiful grounds for the St. Charles Borromeo School Walkathon, and singing in the school choir when Mother Catherine became Saint Catherine. That day, our Bensalem community celebrated with the Catholic community around the world. Now our beloved saint is at rest in Philadelphia, but we cannot let the removal of her body lead to a removal of her memory here in Bensalem. We cannot take for granted the fact that such an important figure in the history of the church and our country called Bensalem home. The future of her home hangs in the balance. I understand the decision to sell the property was not an easy one for the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. They must continue their mission and support the sisters in their care. But I believe we as a community have a responsibility to care for this historic property. I would like to offer a few questions and concerns to the council for consideration before your vote. First, if the zoning for this property is changed, will the public ever be given access to the historic buildings, including the chapel? Buildings hold memories and stand as tangible connections to the past. If the public is no longer welcome in these buildings, how long will it be before we as a community begin to forget who lived there? How long will it be before we no longer care what happens to these buildings? This leads me to my second concern. I have heard the developer respects the integrity of the historic buildings, and I certainly appreciate that. But I wonder, will a developer 100 years from now feel the same respect? Now the chapel is on the National Register of Historic Places, but that designation can change. If the zoning is changed, will it threaten the status of the chapel as a historic building? Will this decision make it easier for the buildings to be raised in the future? In other words, are we doing what's best for the community in the long term as well as in the short term? And I understand that concern was addressed by the council, and I appreciate that. Third, is there any hope of dividing the property and keeping the area around the buildings as open space? Bensalem has some beautiful outdoor spaces, including our Central Park and the Chamonix State Park. However, both are tucked away out of view from main roads. As it is now, the shrine property offers a scenic view from Route 13. It gives Bensalem Township some distinctive character. It shows we value our history. While housing may look beautiful as well, I argue that it could not rival the beauty of the property as it stands now. My final question is, are there other institutional uses that would honor the property's history? When the sisters made the decision to sell the property, it came as a shock. I had no idea they were struggling so much. Had I and others in the community known, I believe we could have rallied around the sisters and offered some help. Now it feels like we're missing another opportunity. Other American saints have museums dedicated to their lives and legacies. The St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Shrine and the St. John Newman Shrine are just two examples. Can we do something similar in Bensalem for our own saint? Or imagine a new Bensalem Community Center. It could house our public library, historical society, and other public resources. And I understand that these institutions already have buildings of their own, but they could take on a new life on the property of the St. Catherine Drexel Shrine. We all know this is a very serious issue. Therefore, I would like to propose the council hold a meeting specifically on the St. Catherine Drexel property, or send out a mailer and ask Bensalem residents for their ideas on adaptive reuse of the property. Personally, I live within walking distance of the shrine, and I found out about this opportunity for public comment through a private individual on Facebook, not through any township outlets. It is difficult to get the word out there when the discussion is just one item buried in a general council meeting agenda. I'm sure more Bensalem residents have ideas, and I would love to hear them. I ask the council and all Bensalem residents to consider these concerns and consider the possibilities before we allow the rezoning and development of the significant property. Thank you.
Well, thank you, but I just wanted to point out a couple things. And I appreciate your thoughts, okay, and I really do. And this was the council, okay, of the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament that chose to sell the property. It's not us. Okay?
Completely understood, absolutely.
Understood. Okay, and you know, I personally have a long history, family history with the property, a long family history. Okay? So my great-grandmother moved here to be next to her sisters, who were the first nuns at the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. My father took care of them as a doctor. My mom worked there. So believe me, it kills me that it's not there. But there was a national shrine there already. They opened up a shrine, and it did not get the support that it needed to survive. Okay. Also, nobody's joining convents anymore. Okay, unfortunately, and the sisters, there's 60 or 70 of them that are all in their 80s and 90s. My brother-in-law ran their campus. My mom worked in their infirmary, and they're all in nursing care at a private facility that needs to be paid for. So we can't just refuse to sell the property to anybody.
No, and I'm not saying that
You know
they
what I mean?
should
I'm just
refuse,
saying,
yeah.
I wish it was.
Yeah.
But-
I mean, I would argue that, you know, had I known that they were struggling, had anybody in the community know that they were struggling so much, all I'm saying is we
Well,
could
people in the community
be
did
missing an
donate.
opportunity.
People in the community, including myself and other people I know, did try to help them, support them financially.
Sure.
So,
Well, there's also, you know, and I appreciate that you have personal connections and personal stories, as so many of us do, but there's going to be a time when none of us are around and nobody's going to
I can assure you,
have that
the
memory.
mayor and myself and council as a whole, I can speak for this. The cathedral is going to be, the chapel's going to be protected. Now, he said that people would be able to visit it. It's going to be protected no matter what goes in there, you know, if I have any breath left in me. Okay, so I was an altar server there. It's a special place. I went to the last mass that was there. Nothing's going to happen to that chapel, okay? But I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was the main concern. I'm going to speak for the mayor because he wouldn't let this happen unless that chapel was going to stay there, because he said that over and over, and we've all said it on this council. That has been a major concern. I mean, if someone else had, and when the sisters sold it, they sold it to this gentleman who has a real strong connection with the Catholic Church and is a Bensalem resident, and he's got the same concerns that you do, and he's trying to propose this to us in order to save the property in as much as it can be in terms of the original buildings being there. I worked there when I was a kid also, by the way.
Sure, it just sounded like that all these resources were going to be restricted to the community residents. So,
Well, no, he said he was going to keep the chapel open to the public, and also, I didn't discuss it, but I had discussions with him. He said it was also going to be some kind of hall that Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, community groups would be able to meet in, so that's possibly part of the plans too. But we are trying to keep
He did say it's not
it
a
public.
gated community. The public can come into the community. It's not gated that people are shut off from there. So people would be able to go into the community, be on the grounds. When I asked them about having your pictures taken there, many people did for weddings. I was honored to serve mass as an altar boy there. I was an altar boy at St. Charles, got to serve mass there. So it's got a lot of history. A lot of the history in Bensalem, I'm sorry to say, is disappearing. Things that have been
right. So
here
this seems like
forever.
our one of our last chances, and I just want to make sure, I couldn't live
appreciate
with
it.
myself
I
if I didn't
appreciate
say something, so.
Yeah, being an altar server was a good gig over there. 7:15 mass, the nuns would make you breakfast afterwards, so
Right.
it was a good gig to get.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good bread. You
serve your breakfast. Remember, you serve your breakfast.
Hi, my name's Bonnie Lawrence. I live at 2047 New York Avenue, Bensalem. My biggest issue is the townhouses. The way they're designed, they're going to be families. They're not going to be older people. Older people don't want steps. And that's why I'm very concerned with, our schools and all the money that we're spending now for our taxes. And also another issue is the houses, the part that's going to be off of 95. I used to live off of Woodhaven Road, and that used to wake me up all the time when I heard the trucks change the gears. And that is going to drive those people crazy. I lasted there 1 year. So they're just my two concerns about the whole issue.
Thank you. Can you identify yourself?
Jim Hardcastle. I live about 3 minutes. Excuse me, I get nervous talking in front of large groups, so just bear with me. But I live about 3 minutes from this site, and about 3 years ago, my parents, they would smack me if I told you their ages, so they're seniors. And they were looking for a place just like this, and they couldn't really find anything in the area. They ended up moving to Fairwoods Hills. They wanted to be close to me, and like I said, this is 3 minutes from my house. So my perspective is this is needed in our area, and you guys alluded to that at the end. So my perspective is I think this is needed, and I also would assume that this is going to create a lot of jobs as well. So that's my thoughts.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lindsay Lear. Actually, Danielle was my sister, so I live at 1708 George Avenue, and I've been a Bensalem resident for 27 years. Firstly, I would like to thank the council for inviting the public to speak tonight, and I would also like to thank the applicant for bringing these plans to all of us to see. Coming into this meeting, I was really nervous about what the building plans would look like, but I do have to say that this is sort of a relief to me, just knowing that the historic buildings will be preserved. I have the same connection to the buildings as my sister and as many of you. I would like to thank Joe Knowles especially for bringing up the point that we need to preserve these buildings and not turn the shell of the chapel into a restaurant or something that it was never before. Although the buildings are on the Register of National Historic Places and have been since the 1970s, I believe, that doesn't protect them. The buyer of any property that's on the Historic National Registry has the right to demolish a building and do what they wish with the property. So I believe it's up to the council's decision tonight to put it in writing that these buildings cannot be disturbed. I know we all have good intentions, but they need to be written down concretely, and I'm glad that the applicant has great intentions for the building. I'm so thankful for that, and I'm thankful that this is a concern to all of you, but this has to be in writing. And as my sister said, 100 years from now, or generations after us when none of us are here, we need to remember what these buildings were meant for and the story that's attached to them. And I think this makes Bensalem a unique place to be, and 100 years from now, if it's not here, then what do we have to offer? Just a bunch of homes or just a bunch of businesses that are just like the town next door. So we need to keep sites like this in our community to set us apart from others. And I asked the mayor and Councilman Kisselback to include this in the, what was the organization, the Bensalem Historical
Heritage Foundation?
Heritage Foundation, right. this is a perfect opportunity. I don't know exactly what the organization is about, but I think this would fit right into to something that the foundation could preserve. Even though it's owned by a private owner, I think we do have a responsibility to preserve the property. So
I'm sure there will be a partnership between the township and the developer, Len Ponzio.
And you being sure
continuing
is great. It's good to hear, but I think there needs to be concrete.
It will be in
written
writing.
down.
It'll be in
Yeah,
writing.
It will be.
I was on the phone with the mayor and our solicitor today discussing various ways that we can put it in writing.
Yeah.
Not because I personally trust Len Ponzio that he will not do this because he knew my mother and father. I don't think he would do it, but he'd be scared to touch that chapel, I think.
Sure.
And he's a good person. So I think that it will be in writing, the guarantee, not only him, but anybody in the future cannot destroy that chapel. It will not happen.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Robert Blinsky, 318 Cambria Avenue, Bensalem. Been a resident for 56 years. I wrote my notes down. Sorry if some of them are going to be repetitive because I got to follow my script. But I'm concerned about the overall scope of this development on Mother Catherine Drexel's property in an area which is already congested. There's 3 rush hours a day because you got to count lunch around here. And the added vehicles such as support trucks, delivery vehicles, linen services, they all have to be taken into account for the property. And then we go with the employees that work there. Now you're talking about a lot more support people. So we're talking even more vehicles on this property. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. To approximate the vehicles from this townhouses, maybe I'm wrong here, but townhouse is allowed to have like 2 cars, correct?
Yeah.
So I'm approximating 180 vehicles, right, just for the townhouses. The assisted living is another 175. And the apartments would be another 260 vehicles, correct? So I'm looking at like 515. Now my math might be a little bit off. 12 years Catholic school, I make mistakes. But that's a lot more units than 107 if you ask me. And the vehicles aren't always going to be parked there. So I would figure that the traffic is going to be a lot higher than we anticipate. All right, also, this is located just across from Catholic Elementary School, a true safety concern of mine. And on Friday nights and weekends, when the heavy congested area is hard to traverse, when most people are off and busy with life's chores, this 605 residential development is of such magnitude that no traffic lights or back roads can support it. It needs to be scaled back and safely designed as to not put any more burden in this area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate it.
Yes, Tony Williams, 3963 Bainbridge Court in Bensalem. This gentleman just said much of what I was going to say. I just want to add to it. We have Woodhaven Road, a lot of traffic generated by that. We have the shopping center, which traffic backs up, constantly blocked, not just at rush hour. Widening Humeville Road will do nothing for you. You're still funneling everything. If they turn left, it's still being funneled into a 2-lane road. Funneled right, traffic's backed up to go on to Woodhaven, go in the shopping center, turn left. It's a bottleneck now. Anything added to it. Tractor trailers, support vehicles that the gentleman mentioned. Cisco, huge tractor trailers. Any number of trucks, support vehicles. We're not talking cars, we're talking trucks will be needed to support this facility. Unless you limit them to overnight, it becomes part of the problem. Traffic is your major issue here. There's just no place for it. Thank you.
My name is Sue Burrow, 2342 New Market Square South. I have a couple questions, actually more than a couple questions. I somehow or another have missed out on the price point of the rentals, the price point of the townhouses. My last conversation with the good sisters were they didn't want to sell to just any developer, but a developer that kept in mind their vision of providing for the needy, low-income housing. I have yet to hear that be addressed. And if that is part of this development, I truly think we have enough in Bensalem. I called last week, not all the apartment complexes, because when I reached 393 vacancies without calling Creekside, I figured we didn't really need any more apartments. We also have Juniper Village. That would be very similar to what's being proposed on an upscale. So, no prices. Why? Have you, council, have not questioned this?
I asked the townhouses, I was told, were going to be market price towards 300,000. So they're going to be
Which
like
is
280 to 320 is the range. I could be corrected. I do not know, they're not low income, and the 55 and older are not low income, but we would have to address that after you're done, what the apartment rentals he expects to be. I don't know the 55 and older.
And
but
are
they're
the
not low.
apartment rentals
They're not-
age restricted?
The apartments are age restricted, 55 and older.
Now,
And
Joe,
you
you
have
know
other
as well
services.
as I do, being a realtor, that holds up to a certain point, and then so many people of an open age have to be allowed in. That's the
No,
law.
well, we're going to put it in the deed that it can never be anything else but a 55 and older community.
And how are you going to get around that?
You can put it in the title, part of the title, you put it in the deed, that it cannot be converted into regular apartments. It has to continue as a 55 and older. Now, Mr. Ponce is going to own them, so that if it's not successful,
Right.
he's going to take a bath or whatever, you know. But I would think that I've had inquiries about people who would want to lease there, but that's just personal people that I know. But you know, I'll have to find out what but it's not low income. It's not low income.
It's not low income.
No,
Okay, even the apartments.
no.
Okay. And Len said that the existing buildings are not viable. They cannot be rehabbed. And then on the other hand, further down in the conversation, he says, but he's not going to tear them down. So if you can't have a building that you can't rehab, it's not livable, outside of the chapel, which I know short of anybody here condemning that, because they would condemn themselves to hell, no. So that just seemed to talk out of both sides of his mouth. No offense, but you said both
Well,
things.
we'll give him an opportunity to answer that after you're done too.
Okay.
Go ahead. Anything else?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the traffic. I don't think anybody has realized about the school bus stops that are right there. And I myself have laid on my horn when people don't see the school bus and they just go around you. I am like, oh no, please. And the pickup and drop off at the schools, is that going to be redone? And the difference of taking Humeville Road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, are we expanding Humeville Road the whole length of Humeville Road? And if so, this 4 lanes, how far is it going to go?
I think they were just turning lanes off of Unionville Road to Bristol Pike, but I could be wrong, but I think they're just turning lanes.
They're my
No,
questions.
they're just turning lanes. It's not, they're not going to make
Just
Unionville
turning
Road wider all
lanes.
the way down.
And what was listed in the Courier Times on the 15th of January of this year, it has about the redevelopment. And it says that there are 16 proposed accessory uses: banks, restaurants, daycares. I didn't hear any of that be addressed.
Well, we did address that. We talked.
Well, you addressed that about a restaurant.
No, everything, any other use is going to be internal to the assisted living area.
Okay,
And we're going to restrict it that it's not meant to be open to the public. Guests and stuff could use it, but I mean, it's generally the same as if you went to any other facility like that, or St. Mary's, or Frankfurt Tarsdale has a deli or
Right,
pharmacy.
right.
I think that's what it's meant for, but we'll address that too.
because my concern is we allow them to build another shopping center.
No.
Every shopping center here in Bensalem has vacancy.
No, that's not going to happen. We'll make sure that doesn't happen, but.
Okay, so no shopping centers, no low-income housing,
No.
okay? And my last but final question is, the gentleman that was here that spoke about how these apartments and their parking lot was going to be in his backyard. I know exactly what he's talking about. But what nobody has addressed is every parking lot has to have those big floodlights, which is going to be in everybody's backyard who lives around there.
Okay, we'll have to address that too if it goes that far, yeah, we'll have to make sure that doesn't.
And I believe his name is Ed. Ed brought up a great thing. We passed this with the modifications. We have no guarantee that this is what we're going to get. And just to remind you, you're all elected officials. And the people who aren't speaking don't like coming up and talking. If you let them talk from their seats, I bet they would have a lot to say. And it's even
Okay, well,
difficult for me to come up here.
All right, well, I appreciate your time. Do you have any other questions?
Nope, done.
Why don't you let him, you don't have to go back and forth, but just so we don't miss a question, so we'll have Mr. Poncia answer some of your concerns, okay?
Okay.
And then if he's not, if you have another question, it's fine.
Excuse me, thank you.
Len, did you hear the questions?
I did. I think the one question that needed further clarification is the following. We're not going to tear down the historic buildings. We're not going to tear down the chapel or the crypt or the mother house or the convent or the mission center because we all value it so much. When we were assessing the property and we were determining a development program that the market wanted that was economically viable, of independent living, assisted living, memory care, the dimensions of the building in and of itself, its very nature is historic. So its dimensions do not lend itself to the designs of today's units. But we're committed to finding a path to repurpose it, whether it's part for, obviously, the chapel for religious reasons, or for the community at large to gather, or some purpose. But we're going to turn the lights on and find a way to use it, and for now and to the future.
And it also, that includes the walkway out of the chapel?
Absolutely.
The porch all the way out, right?
Yes, where the novices
Right.
used to congregate before they access the facility. We know it well.
Okay, what is the, am I correct on the townhouse prices or market price? that
You are
expect?
correct. The interior units were the high twos to the low to mid threes, and the end units were the low threes to the high threes. And if I may,
What about your rental, the 55 and older?
regarding the townhomes, just very
Okay,
briefly, the master bedroom is on the first floor. Many of these developments, this is not our first, it won't be our last, although it's the one that I have the most personal dedication to, although we try to do the right job on every project. Oftentimes, the owner and his wife, the spouse, they live on the first floor. They use a bedroom as an office and another bedroom for visitors. We will have an option for an elevator, not unlike people like Tom Hecker have in their home. So that's the overall sort of premise upon which the townhomes are developed. With regards to the rental rates, whether it be for the active adult, the independent living, the assisted living, or the memory care, as I shared earlier, we went to the market. We utilized the companies that do this every day. We found the competition and what they rented for, et cetera, what the charges were. We took not the low and not the high, the mean, and we used that. For example, the one bedrooms were approximately 800 square feet or so. The active adult, roughly that unit will rent for somewhere around $1,500 to $1,600 a month. The two bedrooms, which are approximately 1,100, 1,200 square feet, they will rent for somewhere around $2,100 a month. The independent living, depending upon the size of the units, from studios, one bedrooms to two bedrooms, the range in the market today 2,500 to 3,000, we're around 2,750 for the studios. Shall I continue?
No, that's, it's not gonna be
The
low end.
one-bedrooms, the market today is 3,000 to 4,000, we were 3,300, we underwrote. The two-bedrooms, today in the market, 3,700 to 4,300, we underwrote to 4,000. Again, somewhere within the middle. And that's how we developed a development program.
55 and older apartments are just concentrated on them, because I know with the.
Approximately $1,600 for a one-bedroom, approximately $2,000 to $2,100 for a
Now, would they
two-bedroom.
get other services besides having the apartment? Would they have
No.
a clubhouse or?
Oh, yes, but not the services that a senior facility like an independent living would have.
But they would
where
have
you
access
could.
to a clubhouse or something?
Of course, yes, but in independent living, you have your own apartment, your own unit, your own kitchen, but you also have a common dining area, so you can either eat, you can make your own dinner or eat with others, and there's, in independent living, it's like assisted living light, if you
Similar to
will.
Juniper Hill?
Similar to that, they have some help if they need it. Does that answer the question?
Okay, does that answer your questions, ma'am? Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, next?
I'm married to her.
Okay.
2342 New Market Square South, Kenborough. I have a couple concerns. The infrastructure. As we all know, and I think Mr. Kesselback has a photography studio right there on 13.
Yes.
Getting in and out of that area is extremely difficult, almost now at any time of the day. You have the conflicting traffic patterns from Wawa's exit strategy to that group of stores entering in that area. The roadway itself is poorly kept. We've had enormous amounts of potholes that never seem to find final resolution, and this will only exacerbate that situation. Clearly, we have a trimodal distribution of traffic, as the one fellow was talking about, a morning, evening, and a midday process. We also have Indian River Trucking, which is located at the entrance to Woodhaven Road.
Yeah.
And this has added to the congestion on that road. We also have to consider that the Route 13 is the alternate strategy for any problem that has happened on Route 13. Whether it's northbound or southbound, people are directed onto Route 13. Again,
Happened on 95, you mean?
yes, if anything, it happened on 95.
Yeah.
I think this is a problem, and I believe this is also an emergency escape route. So now what we've done is we've amped up the traffic volume on an emergency situation. We've also taken, I don't know if there was a study as how much property in the original architecture was covered under roof and under pavement. But clearly what's happening here is a growth in both of those. There is a water problem. As someone astutely said, water runs downhill and it runs toward 95. You have a railroad bridge that has a 6-foot, 8-foot marker on that, not as a prank. I myself have seen an enormous amount of water runoff that way. So now you have a situation where the water runoff can go and head toward the apartment buildings at Cornwell's, and they have basement apartments that flood regularly. This is, again, going to exacerbate an existing problem and move that problem of the water down under that railroad trestle. These are things that I don't hear addressed, and this is not something we can wish away. This is engineering. I also, I'm sorry, but I question the statistics, because the statistics have to be taken into a similar community situation. To quote a national statistic, without having it properly cast against the demographics, would be a mischaracterization. And I think some of the numbers I heard were remarkably low. I'm 69 years old. I still work. I drive every day, and so do my neighbors. They're all older than I, maybe not as old as I am, but so this idea that these people are going to be sedentary is just not true. All right, anyway, thank you very much for your time.
I think as far as the water, I mean, there's 2 retention basins in the back, and I do think that they are required that no water can come off that property if there's a development like this, so it'll be engineered to a point where no water will be able to, there's 2
Well, it has
retention
to
basins that aren't there.
reduce the runoff, not eliminate it. So it has to improve the runoff from
Right.
what currently
Right, but
exists.
it's not gonna-
So there will be, any redevelopment of the property, no matter what it is, has to include a stormware management plan,
Right.
which addresses that
So
water
that's not
runoff.
gonna-
Well, we've had extraordinary waterfall. This year has been a bunker year for rain.
Yeah.
We don't know what next year is going to bring. When I work in the telephone industry, right? You always design for Mother's Day because that's the day where most people make phone calls. Is this going to be designed for Mother's Day in the water realm?
There are similar requirements for basically the statistical average of a storm that occurs once every 100 years, once every 50 years, once every 10 years, those kinds of things. So those are all factored into any stormwater management plan.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the time.
Thanks for coming out.
Hello, my name is Pat Murphy. I live at 3361 Adams Court. And my question really is about the townhouses. Specifically, I've been a resident of Bensalem for close to 40 years. When I'm ready to downsize, I'd like to go to something that is one story. And I don't understand why, and I'm looking for in Bensalem to find a one story that's nice, newer, and there isn't any. And I'm really greatly disappointed to find out that these are going to be two-story townhouses. And yes, you can have an elevator for the cost of $30,000. Or you could just use the one story, which is where the master bedroom is, but then you're cutting down the square feet of your house by half. So I'm just wondering if it's possible to make these one-story townhouses, if you want people to age in place.
Yeah, that's kind of a marketing thing. I understand your point, though, but that's a marketing thing for him, but there will be one-floor master bedrooms with a master bath, I would assume, so, and then if you had guests or something, could go upstairs, but
And if I may, the active adult or the size, it's very similar to what you're describing. So if the end user is really
Len, could you come up to the mic where you're going to
The active adult is of a size similar to what you're describing, the 800 to 1,200 square feet. So if the end user is really looking for a one-floor living arrangement, because they really don't need two floors, that's exactly what the active adult is geared towards.
But it's rental.
It is.
As opposed to ownership.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Tim Whalen, 2382 New Market Square South. Council, Mr. Mayor has just left. This is just a hearing to change the zoning though, right?
Yes.
So when they submit their final plan, we'll get to see it again, right?
Yes.
So really tonight, we're not voting on this, we're just going with the zoning.
Well, we're voting on the zoning change, okay?
Yes.
And we are trying to put restrictions on the zoning change, so the developer doesn't get rights under this zoning to do what he wants. You know what I mean? So, but this isn't the final plan, and we're not approving anything, and we're trying to put as many restrictions.
So we'll get another look at this.
Yeah, and he has an agreement of sale with the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, so there's gonna be no other developer involved for a while anyway, and we have to, there will be another look, yes.
So land development will have to come in
Yes.
front of us, and you will get the
Yeah.
opportunity
Yes.
as will we.
But this rezones the property so that whether or not that development goes forward, that's what the zoning would allow.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to get another look. But I just wanted to say, the questions tonight from our council, and I've known our mayor for years, you guys do your due diligence, and I trust that you guys will. I assume this is going to get built one way or another in the long run, so I hope you guys stay on top of it, and I think you guys are doing a great job, okay?
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, great. My name is John Duty. I live at 1539 Tyson Avenue. My backyard is going to be at the one building. I don't know what letter that is. My thought was, what's the light going to be? Like, there's going to have to be some lighting. I have I guess it's the daycare on the other side of me. I don't have windows on that side. I have one little window, so the lighting doesn't bother me at night. But the backyard, I have my master bedroom, the back window. How much light is actually going to be in this parking lot? And how close is that to my backyard? I mean, I have a deck, I have a pool, and I have probably 6 feet before the back of that, my property line. So how close is that to the back of the property, that parking lot?
Questions like proximity of the property line to your home, landscaping and buffering, site lighting, all this absolutely has to be developed and designed during the land development process. So all this will be part of the process that you'll have ownership to as we work forward for the project. So I can't answer that question tonight to tell you exactly where there might be lighting for the parking lot or exactly where there might be landscaping, but there will be lighting, there will be landscaping, and we will have to ensure that we can best provide it so that it doesn't impact your home, as best as we can.
Okay, is that still a four-story, each one of those buildings is a
Yes,
four-story?
that's correct.
Okay. So one other question. So on 13, there's a mile marker number 13. That's been there for years, I mean, it's there, it's on the property.
Thank you for
Where is
mentioning
that
that.
going?
That is
Is that
staying,
Because
yes.
If you go down further down, it's still there by.
We were
one of the-
remiss in
one
not
of the
pointing
kids.
that out tonight. That's a historic marker that we absolutely are keeping.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name's Mary Ann Griffin. I live at 3101 Addison Court. I've been a resident here for over 60 years. My question actually is probably more towards council and actually doesn't have to do with the rezoning of it. My question is, you said it's 605 houses. Do you know how many people, if it's fully rented, sold, how many people?
Okay, here, ma'am.
How many people-
Ask the question, and we'll get an answer.
Okay, I wanna see how
There's
many-
605 units altogether,
But
not
how many
houses,
people would that be if it was completely rented and sold?
And we can find that out, thank you.
The reason I'm asking is, will this cause any extra stress on our fire and EMS? And now will we maybe get EMS down in Andalusia? Because it takes our squad so long now, and especially if our squad on Humble Road is out, and then the one all the way up on Street Road has to come out. I mean, you're talking senior citizens, older people, 605 units, and what's going to happen to, is our fire department, who's all volunteer except for the paid, are we going to have enough to cover it and take care of this place?
Okay, but let Mr. Ponce answer this, but I would think that in the assisted living, they have medical facilities to take care of people, but I could be.
Well, not if it's an emergency, they have to go to a
Well,
hospital.
I don't know, let him address it.
That is correct, but the truth of the matter is, this property was owned by a religious order. Now, if it is developed, the ratables generated by this project will provide a tremendous impact in a positive way to the township to allow for help financially for assistance, whether it be emergency vehicles, fire vehicles, and the like. Because the project was a nonprofit and there were no ratables. And what we're proposing is a project that would be a big plus as far as the revenue stream from the project itself.
So you're saying you would basically be able to help the township out with expanding if
The
we...
ratables from the project itself will provide a new revenue stream to the township that they can utilize as they determine appropriately.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so anything that gets developed there will go on the tax record and they'll pay their
Well,
property
if it's not
taxes in the
institutional,
township.
yeah,
Right,
anything like this, yeah.
right. And so it would go into the township in terms of revenues for property taxes along with everybody else's property taxes. And it would be distributed per the mayor's annual budget.
And the townhouses, there could be children from the townhouses. Some of them might go across the street to St. Charles, but other kids might go in the public schools from the townhouses. They're saying that they're going to think it's going to be, but there could be children from the townhouses. But I do think that cost of the number of children there is going to be overridden by the number of 55 and older apartments that we get revenue from, and also the assisted living and all those facilities, we get taxable income to the school district. So that would probably be a plus in the long run, the whole development.
Okay, my concern usually is community service, so that's why I was thinking of that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. How's everybody today? My name's Alan Windsor. I live at 3232 Azalea Avenue. And just the fact that you using this as a mixed-use development, I don't understand it because you're only putting people in homes there or in facilities. It's not a mixed use. A mixed use means you're putting in shopping centers and gas stations, and you're putting in more than just people living there.
Well, it's mixed-use residential, so it's for primarily for age. Besides it's UR, it's not mixed use. That is a term, mixed use, but this is mixed use and it's residential. So
Okay.
the mixed use comes in effect that there are townhouses that are normal sales. He said he's going to market them, whatever, but they're 90 townhouses.
I heard all that.
Okay, then there's 55 and older apartments, and then there's assisted living and memory care and nursing care. So those age things are mixed use. That's the mixed use, not retail, not anything else.
Well, in addition, it'll be the accessory uses.
Yeah, the accessory uses too.
Attached to
Yeah,
those
yeah,
residential
exactly.
units.
Right.
And the internal,
And then the chapel
Stuff.
itself.
yeah, and the chapel itself will be open to the, so.
All right, during this whole thing, I heard there's going to be a restaurant inside of the place and a pub and a bar or whatever for
That's only
the
for-
residents.
Well, if you go to Juniper Hill that used to,
Right.
that's what my godmother's in there, so I go to visit her.
Like licensed.
So, yeah, but she gets certain credits for lunch, so I can go there and go to lunch with her.
All right, it's going to be a
We do that.
licensed
So it's going to be
pub.
that type of thing, where the residents can go to lunch there.
It's going to be a licensed pub.
They
You
have
mean,
to have a license.
you mean get a liquor
Has to
license?
have a
Yeah,
liquor
you have to have a
license.
license. We approved the liquor
But
license
it's
for,
only used for the residents.
only used for the residents.
When you get a liquor license, anybody can go into a bar when they have a liquor license.
We
No,
just approved it for Juniper Hill. to
Juniper
give
Hill
them
just
their
built-
liquor license, and they can only use it for.
private property. You cannot-
Check the law on this. I think I'm right with this. Anybody can go into a pub if it's licensed by L&I. Anybody. All right,
It's not going
that's-
to happen.
It's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
It can, all right, that's
Okay.
another story, all right. Mike, I have one question. On Route 13, will there be sidewalks and curbs on Route 13? I don't think there is now.
No.
No, but we haven't gotten to the.
That's a
later
development.
I know, that's one of my things I would like to know is coming up. Transportation for like buses and stuff, are they gonna have people in these in this mixed-use area where they can go out to like the grocery store? I mean, are they gonna have buses to transport and help these people?
We can ask, but I would think that they're going to have the mini buses, like the
Right.
shuttle services.
Yeah, can
The Juniper has
Conceptive
shuttle
possibly
service.
be in there somewhere? I don't know if there's anything that goes up and down Route 13.
Their shuttle can
No,
take
they have the
people
private
where
shuttles.
they want to go.
I know, but if they don't want to use the shuttle, they want to walk out to 13, is there buses, transportation that they can get? I mean, it's another thing to look forward to.
There's transportation is available for seniors.
Is this whole development going to be in one, come to see you in one big lump? Or is it going to be every time they want to build a building, they have to come into the township and,
No, the land development will be one big development.
one big development?
Yeah.
All right, recreation, there's nothing in there for, I didn't hear anything about recreation except for the people that live there. So, you know,
He said there's passive recreation, but he can speak to this, but I believe that the individial recreation is like a gym
Right.
or a workout
It's only
area.
for the
That's
people
gonna be
that
for the people that live
there.
And the walkways, Jeff.
Yeah, there'll be walkways and stuff like that, though.
Okay, all right,
Passive walkways, yeah.
all right. I think this is a little bit too much for this area. It's a lot for Route 13. Everybody lives here. We all know what it's like. It's just way too much. And transportation would help it a lot to,
Okay.
all right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lenny, is there going to be shuttle buses
Yeah.
for the,
Yes,
for the
there always
assist-
is, part of the program. There's actually a car and a shuttle to, some people need to go to a doctor, one's specific, or a group might go to shop somewhere, et cetera. But yeah, there always is. that
so
kind
they
of
might want to go to the mall all
That's right.
together, or other religious areas that
That's
they might
right.
wanna- other
Exactly.
faiths and stuff, you'll be able to go to services?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, council. My name is Robert Homolka, and I live at 3213 Whitney Court, Bensalem, PA. And I wanted to offer some thoughts on the historical aspects of what's occurring on this property. And I have some handouts for council. I'd like to give them out, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. You talked about this already, yeah.
Thank you.
We talked about this already. What is it doing? You can.
I brought these handouts to illustrate a few points concerning the historical
Yeah, I
aspect.
know, we got one more person.
I'm sorry? Do you need one, Mr. Pizzo, or?
No, he was just telling me, so go ahead.
Okay.
We're good.
I brought some of these images in for a historical illustration of some of the points that I had. The first one has to do with the mile marker, and Len knows that I've been after them since day one about the mile marker issue. As you can see from the photographs, that the mile marker down there, which has been there, to the best of our knowledge, since roughly the American Revolution.
Well, he said that's staying. That's staying.
Okay, and I'm not disputing that it's going to stay, but it's within 7 feet of the edge of the paved surface down there. Now, if you're going to end up eventually putting sidewalks in there, that's going to be sitting right in the middle of the sidewalk.
Well, that's in a development thing, but we're not gonna put a sidewalk in place that, so we're not gonna do that.
I'm sorry?
We're not gonna override that with a sidewalk if it's an historical marker.
So you're going to work right around that?
Yeah, we'll either work around it or not have sidewalks.
Even though that this is in PennDOT's right away?
Well, it won't be, well, that's under development, but I think we're gonna commit to, if it's an historical marker, we're gonna keep it.
Would you or the applicant be willing to agree to a deed covenant to that effect?
I'll have to ask, we'll ask if he will, yeah. I can't, but he can. But we'll ask, we'll make sure it's not, I don't think it will be disturbed, if it's a historical marker.
I would like to see him commit to that in writing.
Okay, we'll
for a deed covenant.
We'll get an answer for you for that.
And the next thing that I'd like to speak to is if you go back to the page with all the text on it and it's highlighted in yellow, that's from the nomination, that's a sheet out of the nomination for National Historic Registry for Mother Catherine's that was
Right.
filed in 1976.
Right, I think it was granted in 78 or something.
And it was granted in 1978, and it
Right.
clearly lists the 5 buildings that are the original buildings on there. Holy Providence School,
That was already destroyed.
that was destroyed by fire, and it's listed
Well, it was
further down in the
vacant. It was
text.
vacant before that. My sisters went there, but so did the mayor's daughter, but
The other 4 buildings are still in existence. And the laundry building, which is listed on the National Historic Register sheet here, is missing from that plan up there right now. Now, we heard tonight that he was not going to tear down any buildings, but yet this building just magically is missing up there.
well, we'll address that. If it's on the historical, we'll try to see if we can do that.
Is the applicant willing to commit to that?
I hope, we'll ask him if he is. We'll ask him if he is.
me to speak to that now, because that's easier?
Well, hold on, Len, because I want to make sure he might have other questions you have to speak to. Do you have other questions?
Well, the other thing I was going to suggest is, for this MUR, why not just make the area around the original buildings a historic district of some sort, and that would protect the buildings?
Well, we're going to do something to protect the buildings. We're going to listen to, we're going to protect the historical buildings on the property. So we'll have a way to do that, and Lenny will address it now, but we're going to make sure that it's protected.
When you say that, can you be more specific about,
I'm
are you
gonna-
saying all the
It's going to be in
buildings?
writing that the historical buildings that he's committing, that he commits to save and store, it's going to be in writing that they have to stay there forever. It's going to be in writing. We're going to make sure it's done.
And it's going to include these 4 buildings that are existing from the original?
I have to ask about the laundry. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll ask about that.
Well, if you look at the last photograph that I have in that handout, that is the building down at the
I just said we're going to
site.
ask about that. We'll ask about that, yeah. We'll ask about that.
All right, I'd be interested in hearing if Lennon wants to
Okay,
address
go
it
ahead,
right now.
Lennon.
Thank you.
There are a number of existing buildings on the property that will no longer be there in the redevelopment. What we have proposed to keep and retain are a substantial number of existing buildings. Not every single most important, but as many most important as we can. The undertaking to keep the Mother House, convent, chapel, crypt, mission center, and associated attached buildings in and of itself.
And the cemetery.
And the cemetery.
Right.
Is monumental. We don't, as we've discussed earlier, there's no exact proposed reuse tonight. We're committed to finding a path forward, but that in and of itself is a huge commitment. If we were to attempt to keep other buildings throughout the property as well, the project would not be able to be developed.
The rebuttal I have to that is, if you take down this building, the laundry building, we are setting precedent for a piece of property in Bensalem to have it altered from its National Historic Registry status. Only 6 properties in Bensalem currently hold this status, so it's pretty special in that regard. So any buildings lost any buildings lost, in my mind, is not acceptable, especially since in Len's plan currently, the laundry building is replaced by a parking lot.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we need to take a break at some point, so do you want to finish quickly, or do you want to wait until we get back?
I'll just finish quickly.
Okay, all right, go ahead, I'm sorry, because some people have to take a break, so go ahead.
Good evening, my name is Joyce Hadley, 2921 Sussex Road in Trevose. Good evening to Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, and members of the council. I am very devoted to St. Catherine Drexel, to her mission, and also very devoted to the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. Many of the council members and the mayor know that already. And I am here this evening because I realize that this is just a zoning situation, but I have very specific questions about the historical perspective, but I realize that the sisters eventually will need their money. That's a given. I took it upon myself to contact the Pennsylvania State Historic Preservation Office. I spoke to the gentleman by the name of Scott Doyle, who's the Preservation and Incentives Manager. And I specifically was interested in the historical marker, which I'm sure all of you have seen, the historical marker.
Yeah, it's it.
Okay. I have some information for you here that I will expound upon.
Hey Joyce, how you doing? Good, thank you for your concern too.
Thank you, Joyce. That's all right. That's all right, no problem.
Now, as we all know, that this is on the Register of Historic Places, and the National Park Service register is an official federal list of churches, district sites, buildings, structures, and objects significant in American history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture. Now, it does indicate that because it is on the register, that a new developer could demolish all the buildings, and God forbid that they would do all of that. And I am very specific about St. Elizabeth's Chapel. And I heard from part of the commentary this evening that you want to use this for perhaps a multi-purpose. And in that, the mission of St. Catherine Drexel is very dear to our hearts because she is our celebrated saint. I would hope that there would never, ever be any desecration or misuse specifically of the chapel. So I would hope that whenever you're thinking about any ordinances, that you are very, very strict in making certain that there are never any changes to that chapel. And I specifically would like to learn more from the potential owners exactly what their intention is about the usage of the chapel. I also, many of you mentioned here earlier about the marker text, and I did some research on that. So what I would like to know specifically, the marker that is currently there, is that going to be removed, or what will be the use for the marker? Because that is the historical perspective. And I'd like to hear from the potential developers, what they're going to use with the markers. And the plaque that is outside the convent right now, the Catherine Drexel plaque, as I'm sure all of you have seen that, this plaque. All right. You know about that? I'd like to know what's going to happen to that, too. So they are some of my questions, and I'm very sad to see this property go because I have a very sincere interest in the future of the sisters, and I know that they need their money, but I want this property to be used to the best usage and never to be desecrated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Allow me to once again stress and reiterate our commitment to the chapel. Frankly, and I'm not familiar with the actual religious terminology, but when we undertook this initiative and were humbled and honored to be the steward in the repurposing of the property, we were told by the sisters that the chapel was being decommissioned by the Archdiocese. They were removing all the religious artifacts, and they were very, very upset and saddened by that. Not certain how I was fortunate enough to achieve this, but I petitioned the Archdiocese, made a presentation to ask them to stop the decommissioning so that we could keep it a religious chapel. They've not committed 100% to do so, but they have stopped the decommissioning. So we are very dedicated to keeping it a religious chapel. As many of you who know me know that I could do nothing but that. With regards to the religious markers, once again, as far as we're concerned, we're the stewards of the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. What they want us to do with those markers is what we will do, and only do. Thank you.
Okay. Well, yeah, go ahead, and then we need to take a break, but go ahead.
Hi, Deborah Gallagher, 925 Claremont Avenue.
Okay.
We could really solve all this and just don't change the zoning, just keep it institutional.
Yeah, but then something institutional could just go there, and we couldn't stop it.
But that would be better than having the townhouses. That's another thing. And
Okay,
all
but
the,
someone with institutional doesn't have to keep the chapel, or doesn't have to keep the mother house or the other historical things. So, and we didn't choose the developer. The Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament Council, their council, the sisters that are in charge of the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, interviewed people and decided this developer is the one they want to, out of a national search that had nothing to do with us. Matter of fact, even though Mr. Poncia was in my class in 6th grade, I had no idea he purchased the property until after it was done, because it was a closed process between a national person who sells religious facilities mostly, and the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament picked this developer. We didn't pick him. So if it's institutional, any kind of institution could win it. I personally heard that the Archdiocese tried to consider it for St. Charles Seminary, but they thought that the buildings were in too bad a shape and the cost would be too much, and they decided they couldn't do it. Other colleges, they could not do it, they wouldn't do it. So there was some other options that were considered. Holy Family College that wasn't interested in it. There was other situations.
I know, I've talked to the mayor.
Yeah, so there's other ones, and my brother-in-law worked there at the time, so I heard this through the grapevine. But there was other efforts to get other religious institutional people to take it over, and they couldn't do it.
All right,
So the
but-
Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament picked this developer.
Okay, but did they have the initiative that they could have, aren't they doing the multi-use? Didn't they come up with that, the buyer?
The buyer did, but the sisters, he made a presentation to the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, and they picked out of the presentations they received through their
So
representative.
the sisters didn't want to keep it institutional, like we said with the colleges or anything?
Well,
They
they
needed a
tried that.
buyer, they needed a buyer.
They need someone to buy it, yeah, they need the money to do it, unfortunately.
I understand. The townhomes, and he says that it's going to be assisted living, independent. Why can't it be like an institution like Ann's Choice, where they buy into it and not have to have the rental? You understand what I'm saying?
I understand how Ann's Choice works,
Yeah.
yeah, but I think that's a high-end thing. It's very, very expensive to go into Ann's Choice.
Well, I know.
So I don't know, and maybe the market's not there for it, I'm not really sure.
But I'm just saying for the outcome of the whole area. So
I'm
we
not
don't
in
have all
that-
this
I'm not in
big
that business.
houses and everything like that. If it stayed like Ann's Choice, then these people are just coming in and out, maybe once in a while, and some of them don't even drive that much, because I worked for Penwood Village.
I drive by Ann's Choice every once in a while, and that seems to be pretty large to me. That would be
Oh, it's large, but
overly
we
large
can
compared to what
downscale
he's
it, but we can
proposing, I
downscale
think.
it.
But it
You know.
all comes
Pretty big
down to
buildings.
dollars and cents of what the sisters have to get.
The sisters need a certain amount of money for the property, unfortunately. They've been very generous with, you know, their history in the township with property,
Right.
with charity,
Mhm.
with a national service to Native Americans, with specifically to minorities like
I grew up
blacks
with
and
them.
Indians, right? So they, you know, they've done a lot.
Yeah.
So they're very elderly. My mom used to take care of them full time. So they would pass away 8 on a weekend, 10 on a weekend. You know, so they're all in their 80s and 90 years old, and they need money to take care of themselves in a private nursing home, which you know what that costs. So that, I mean, that's not, that's why they're in that dilemma. So
No, I
the
am.
sisters made this, they're disheartened about it too.
Well, I'm thinking about my neighbor that was up here, and these places being right behind them. I mean, we're getting encroached as it is already, you know, with everything.
Okay.
It's a little too much. It's a little too high. Can't you make that an open space? Why do they have to come into our neighborhood? They're coming more into our neighborhood, coming up against him like that.
Okay,
That's what I'm saying.
we'll ask about that.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, we're going to take a break, okay, because we need to take a break. Okay, okay.
Ron, did you get enough signatures?
Okay, it's getting, we're going to do some escrows, but it's getting on, one, it's 10:30, we do have a curfew, which is 10:30, and it's also snowing, okay? But also, there's been substantive changes to the, what's been presented that cannot be changed tonight. So, Mr. Pizzo, can you explain the process here that we're going to follow?
Certainly. Based on the notes that I took during the course of the hearing on both the rezoning and the text amendment, I have at least half a dozen potential revisions to the ordinance that I believe the applicant has indicated they are agreeable to. Those would include, but are not limited to, the insertion of language that there would be a 2-bedroom limit in the independent living and the active adult lease units. It's been stated on the record that that would be the case, but it's not in the ordinance, so we would want to insert that. That the townhouse as a percentage of the use and dwelling mix in section 310.10. I believe Mr. Hecker indicated that based on the 90 units that the developer has committed would be the maximum, that would work out to roughly 14% of the overall number of units that are currently being proposed. So we could insert that in. I suggest to council that perhaps we'd want to round it to 15, but that among the use and dwelling mix, that 15% of the total units within the community would, that would be the maximum number that could be townhouse units. And we could even include there 15% or 90, whichever is the lesser number. One item that I was going to bring up just in general, I discussed this with Mr. Hecker before this evening's meeting. The proposed language for the townhouses in the ordinance is they're described as attached single-family units. It would be my preference, so that we have consistency throughout our zoning ordinance, that we change that designation to townhouse dwelling units, and that we would parrot the definition of a townhouse dwelling unit that's currently found in our R33 section of the township zoning ordinance, so that we would have the same definition for townhouse in MUR as we currently have in R33. that in the building coverage section, again, this was minor, but I wanted to bring it up, the word tract should be inserted. Maximum building coverage shall not exceed 35% of the overall tract area. And then there was a discussion on the number of parking spaces for the single-family attached units, now to be called townhouse dwelling units. Right now in the ordinance, it's at 2.0. There was some discussion that the applicant had said 2.5 would be the number, but they would want to continue to have their discussion or have their proposal regarding garages. At least the sense I got from the council was that irrespective of the discussion on garages, Township would want to be consistent that we don't allow the garages to be counted in the parking calculations, and that would be the same for MUR as it is for any other district in the township. But that not aside, I'm not clear on whether the council would want to see 2.5 or whether you would want to see the 3.5, which is the overall number that would be required in your R33 district, or whether you wanted to see some combination of shared parking between the townhomes and the other uses. So that's something, again, that I can work on with Mr. Hecker if you want to give me a little direction.
They need to put their best foot forward and see whether we agree.
You know my feelings on that. I would express them to you.
They need to put they've heard the comments, so they need to put their best foot forward.
Well, Mr. Hecker and I can work on that then and come back to you with a number that, again, you'll have a second bite at this apple. And then finally, I believe following the lengthy discussion on the historic structures and the conversation I had with a few of you during the recess we just took, that we would insert language to the effect of that the existing historic structures located on the property shall not be demolished without the approval of the Township Council.
Historical properties.
The historic structures.
Structures.
So historic structures would take into account the building, would also take in the mile marker and any other markers located on the property. So those are based on my notes from the discussion and
there's a
the
deed
comments from the
restriction for
public.
there's a deed restriction for the 55 and older, that they have to remain 55 and older?
Deed restrictions would not be
Part of that?
Right,
Okay.
that's correct.
So he had to commit to that at a later date?
That he would commit to that during land development.
Okay.
Mr. President, I'm sorry, Mr. President, I didn't want to interject.
Certainly.
Are you finished with?
Yes.
There's a lot of people that came this evening, and some of that wording that Mr. Pizzo went over is simply just, there's a lot of bigger issues that came up this evening. And some of those items, I'll be quick, I know we're on a time crunch here. First, this is not, I think we need to all remember it's not a land development plan. I have a couple concerns, and the rental units came up. Another article I did through research showing that legislation is now moving through Trenton that would allow developers to petition municipalities to remove age restrictions on already approved projects. I brought up traffic, and Mr. Roth, I respect your analysis and so forth. However, I have two articles from different areas in the country, primarily both actually in Maryland, noting extreme traffic concerns with similar projects, homes at Fountain Green and at Bethany Glen project. I still don't feel like we got definitive clarification as far as the reuse of the buildings. Yes, the historical structure will remain, however, what's going to happen inside those walls, I'm not exactly sure. The MUR allows flexibility and opens the door for increased development and for significant changes to the concept plan. And we have to also remember is that this was strictly just a concept plan. A couple weeks ago, we looked at a plan that was down State Road, and we actually looked at both the rezoning as well as the land development plan simultaneously to give us a little bit more comfort to know that when we're changing the zoning, that we're also then understanding what that land development will be exactly. I am concerned about the depth and scale of the concept plan as it was shown this evening. And the ambiguous MUR draft, as it's written today, outside of Mr. Pizzo's items that he noted, leaves many questions. And for that note, with that said, and let me just also add, I've been here 30 plus years, a resident in Bensalem, and I do recognize the historical presence and value of this property. People would come to Bensalem for this particular property. With that said, I'd like to put a motion on the table that we deny the plan, the MUR, as it's been drafted, as we see it this evening.
I'll second that.
Oh, it's a surprise. He just threw it out of left field, Ed.
Okay, well,
He didn't
that's
ask for a
fine.
motion, he just
Okay,
asked for comments.
okay, that's all right. That's but we're gonna redo the.
Well, procedurally, at least when we started, the direction that I understood we were going was that this ordinance, based on the changes discussed this evening, would have to be re-advertised if council wants to move forward with this. Because the changes are so substantive that under Pennsylvania state law, under the municipality's planning code, the number of potential changes that you would be making to this ordinance are such that it would require once it's put into its new form, it would have to be re-advertised. Notice would have to go back out to the public, and council would then be acting on essentially a new ordinance, or at least an amended version of this ordinance. Certainly the question of denying this ordinance can be voted on, but the net effect of what you're talking about is that this ordinance wouldn't be approved tonight anyway.
Right. It's not being approved.
What you've essentially directed me to do, or what at least I thought you were talking about doing, was what's going to be a new ordinance that's going to have to be re-advertised anyway.
Right.
But those items still aren't going to address the.
I don't know if voting to deny this has any, other than for show, I don't know from a legal perspective.
They would just come back with a new ordinance anyway.
If what you're going to be doing as a council is going to make a difference. But if, I just put that out there for all of you before you take whatever action you're going to take.
Okay, well, do we have to?
There's
Joe?
a motion and a second on the table, though.
Okay.
And if,
Do we have to vote on it now, Joe?
well, he asked for a motion, I mean, he motioned,
Well,
he seconded,
you
you have
could,
discussion.
a motion to table the motion would always be in order.
Oh, okay.
If someone were inclined to do that. Again, this ordinance.
Make a motion to table the motion?
This ordinance, as it currently stands, assuming council wants to see a revised version of it, is for all intent and purposes dead.
We don't want to vote, what are we going to vote?
Right. Just call the vote, John.
Call-
There's
Well,
additional
Are we
discussion.
gonna, additional discussion?
Additional discussion or call the vote.
Okay. Let's make a motion. Does anybody want to make a motion for
There is a
There's a motion
motion
on
and a
the table.
second to deny this ordinance.
deny this ordinance? Okay. All in favor of denying?
Aye.
Okay. Any against?
Aye.
Aye. Okay?
All right,
So, now, that does not mean, just to clarify for the people out there, that does not mean that it's approved, okay? That means that we're not voting, or we voted not to deny a ordinance that is not going to be the same ordinance that's going to be in front of us at the next meeting. So that was all for show. There's going to be a new ordinance advertised.
Not for show, no matter
There's a new
what.
ordinance, excuse me, everybody likes your little show, but that's okay. But listen, there's a new ordinance that's going to be advertised, okay? You can come back out again, and you can vote no at that time, okay? So there's going to be a new ordinance that's advertised.
Mr. Pizzo, how long do we need?
We have to put a motion on the floor first.
Well, what we need to do, having that vote having now been taken, in order to save some expense in terms of the re-advertisement of the rezoning of the property itself, item 10, what I would suggest is that item 9 and 10 both be tabled to a date certain. It's going to have to go up to the County Planning Commission. It's going to have to go back in front of the Township Planning Commission after these changes are presented. It would be ambitious, but why don't we say March 25th? If we don't make that date, then it can always be tabled again. We can give the public advance notice that it isn't ready for the 25th, or we can just go for the first Monday in April, whatever.
I'll put a motion on the floor, Mr. President, that we revisit this
Table items 9
table,
and 10.
number 9 and number 10. We're going to table to March 25th with the, which was discussed with the changes we discussed with our solicitor. Any councilman can add to those changes by giving them a call if they want to add to that. And it will be discussed with the developers. And at that time, March 25th, a new ordinance on number 9 and a new hearing on number 10 would also be considered by the council.
I'll second.
Okay, all in
Is there
favor?
discussion on that?
You want to discuss? Go ahead.
Sure, you can.
I'm just extremely disheartened over
It's still snowing though, and it's still after past our.
I'm extremely disheartened over the idea that I would put up a vote simply for show. And I think it's just important.
You did do it for show. You did do it for show. I talked to you during the break.
It's important.
I talked to you during the break.
You did.
And advised you, and asked you, and told you.
And I expressed
said-
my concerns.
And I said, that's what we're going to do.
And let me just finish.
Okay,
Let
go
me
ahead,
finish.
go ahead.
I am a voting member of this board.
That's
And
fine.
I have my right to vote whatever way I want to vote.
I said that. You can vote the way you want.
Thank you.
Well, I didn't say you couldn't vote, but I said you couldn't vote. You can vote.
And further, regardless of any changes that are made,
Right.
as presented, I think that everybody in this room agrees this doesn't work. I think that we've gotten verbal agreements from the developers, from the board, from the public, that this doesn't work.
Then you can vote no again on March 25th.
The point is, regardless of whether your vote
I may
passed
vote no
or
on
the
March 25th.
second vote
I mean,
passed,
you know, it's just-
it results in the same exact thing. It's going to be brought up
It's,
before the council.
I agree,
another time.
Again,
I agree.
March
It's the
25th.
insinuation that any of this is for show.
The last vote, just the last vote. You knew it didn't mean anything, but that's all
Can we
right.
stop,
I don't want to
please?
argue it though.
We didn't when
I'm
we.
trying not to argue.
Let's move on, please.
Okay, that's all right. Everybody has their.
Call the
Okay.
vote.
All right, we're moving on, okay? So
Call
I
the vote.
appreciate everybody coming out,
Did you
and you
call the
have,
vote?
please come back on the 25th.
Did you call a vote?
We did call a vote, didn't we?
No, they stopped. Call the vote.
I'm sorry, all in favor of moving the ordinance 9th to 10th to the 25th, a day certain? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against?
Nay.
Nay, okay. So you have the right to vote, that's good. Voted again. Okay, so, number 11, consideration of escrow release for Wawa, the final on 3620 Street Road, amount $50,000. Ron?
Let me get to that one. Let me borrow it. I'm not sure here.
No, we don't do data for break that.
February, the first one, I'm sorry, is Pravco Wawa. They had requested, this is a final release, and we are releasing the final $50,000 being held in escrow. We recommend releasing it, subject to audit by the Finance Department, and if there's any questions, Mr. Neron has been here since 6:30, so if you want to need any more information, he's here to help us.
Okay, are there any questions about this release? Is there a motion for the release?
I'll make a motion, we approve the release, subject to audit by the finance department.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any against? Okay, that's good. Okay, number B, letter B there, Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A has requested the amount of $302,698.75. All items have been successfully completed except as on the attached tabulation, and we are therefore recommending a release of $292,698.75, subject to audit again by the Finance Department.
So moved. I'll put that in form of a motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any against? Okay. All right, public comment. Does anybody else have any public comment? Okay, seeing no one come, it's snowing. So public comment is closed. All in favor, any other business, Ron?
Well, it's a very important day. It's Thursday for all of you. If they don't know what I'm talking about, you're in trouble.
Valentine's Day, right. Okay, Mr. Mayor, do you have any,
Just wish you and all of council and everyone out there a very loving
Mr. Pizzo, do you have anything else that you're concerned?
Mercifully, nothing more. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sloan, do you have anything you would like to?
Last meeting, there was an item on the agenda, the Marwin Avenue abandonment of that. I thought that we had voted to table that to tonight's agenda, but it wasn't on the agenda.
I thought
we'd done
Marvin
it to a date
Avenue,
certain.
when was that tabled to? Marvin Avenue?
That was, that was,
revisiting that whole thing.
Okay, so we pulled that off the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
We did.
okay. Thank you very much. That's all I had.
I think they're reconsidering what they're doing, but
I have nothing.
you have nothing about the Flyers or any goalies? Okay, Ed?
Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Enjoy your family, enjoy your loved ones for sure, because sometimes you don't know how big it is.
Happy Valentine's Day as well. And I saw a text come over, 2-hour delay for the school district for tomorrow.
2-hour delay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Real quick, I just wanted to mention real quick, happy Valentine's Day, of course, and I wanted to mention, so I don't forget, we have a PGA Hope Bensalem Spring Sessions, May 15th, 22nd, 29th, June 5th, and the 12th, from 5 to 7. There's a clinic for golfers that are available to any veterans. Okay, it's free to veterans. They will supply clubs if you need clubs. They help out if you're disabled. They try to accommodate you. Anybody that's interested can call the Bensalem Golf Club at 639-5556 for a veterans free clinic and golf lessons. Okay? All right, with that, adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Adjourn, yes.